virtually as well. This meeting is going to be recorded, and a copy will be, of course, available on the website following the meeting. Just some practical points to begin with, just to ask those who are presenting reports to take into account that members of the board will have read the reports, and I would ask colleagues just to highlight main points in their papers and to draw attention to anything that might have changed since they were drafted. We are looking to take a short break at around about 11:15. At 11:30, the Chief Exec and I have a 15-minute Teams meeting with the Cabinet Secretary. So depending on timing, it may be that Kath as Vice Chair takes over for 15 minutes or so whilst Paul and I are out of the room. Can I this morning welcome Richard Hughes, our Deputy Director of Nursing, who's attending on behalf of Greg Dix, the Executive Director of Nursing and Deputy Chief Executive. Good to see you, Richard. Good morning. Claire Taylor from Clais Cymru, attending on behalf of Daniel Price. Can I also welcome Anna Llewellyn, our Mental Health and Learning Disabilities Care Group Nurse Director. I know we're also hoping that Robert Richards, our lead nurse, will be joining us shortly as well, as they're both presenting the item 3.1. And online, can I welcome Owen James, Head of Corporate Finance, and Anthony Ford, Audit Wales, for attending the meeting virtually to take part in the presentation of the item 5.3. Great to welcome some of our colleagues here this morning as well. Janet Gilbertson, Assistant Director of Clinical Education. Good to see you this morning, Janet. And also Sherry Lewis, another member of staff, is with us this morning. Good to see you both. Sorry it's a bit crowded, and sorry you're being chucked in the corner, but it's the best we can do. But really good to see you both, and you're very welcome to observe our meeting this morning. Under item 1.2, apologies for absence. We've received apologies, as I said, from Greg. Apologies also from Rachel Rowlands, independent member, and Simon Blackburn, our Director of Communications, Engagement and Fundraising. Declarations of interest. We have asked whether colleagues need to declare any interest before the meeting. We've not been notified of any. Can I just double check? Do members have anything they need to declare before we begin? No. Okay. Super. Just to deal with the consent agenda item, as you know, in order to focus our attention on those matters that are really quite sort of business critical to us, the consent agenda is towards the back of today's pack. However, if there are any matters that colleagues would like to bring forward for consideration, then please let us know. If there is anything, then we can accommodate it earlier in the agenda. Nothing to. There is one item on the consent agenda that Gav and I need to alert you to, but we'll come back to that later in the meeting. But unless there's anything that colleagues need to bring forward, we'll leave it as it is. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 3, our shared listening and learning story. So absolutely delighted to welcome Anna this morning. I think Anna may be doing this solo unless Robert makes an appearance. But obviously, colleagues are very familiar with Anna and the leadership she gives to our mental health services. And this is a patient story relating to the patient experience of care received via our CAMS and also our adult mental health services. I think there's a story that Anna's going to take us through, and I think there may be some slides as well, possibly. But yeah, terrific. Anna, super to see you, and we'll hand over to you.
I think I might stand just so that everyone can see me. So this is Kira's story, and I'm going to read it as we received it. So myself and the deputy who were in a partnership meeting, and we heard Kira's story, and we were not aware of Kira's story before this partnership meeting. So I'm going to read it as we heard it. There's a little bit at the end that won't make sense with me reading it, but I'll do that anyway. So, hi, my name is Kira, and I would like to tell you about my experience of using mental health services. I was 15 when I first used mental health services, and I'm now 18 and still haven't received any proper help from services. My mental health suffered really bad during the COVID pandemic, and I wasn't able to attend school due to my anxiety and the school being back in and then off. I couldn't sit my GCSEs as I wasn't able to function or even get out of bed. I simply couldn't face the world. Everything felt like it was against me. The thought of leaving the house was something I'd never thought I'd do again. If I'm honest, the thought of living was a daily struggle, and I felt the only way to be free of the pain was to end it all. I finally built up the courage to go to the doctors and to receive the help I needed and the help I deserved. My thoughts were, well, mental health services are there to help people. Hopefully, they will help me. Well, this is where I was completely wrong. After a wait of about a month, I finally had my letter to go to my CAMS assessment. This is where I first met my therapist, Sue. She was one of few out of the service who actually wanted me to get better and actually help me. We put a plan in place on the therapy we would do and planned for me to finally get better. I met with Sue every week for about 2 months. I'd have my ups and downs, but I was getting slightly better. When it came to my next appointment, I'd received a letter from CAMS and my appointment was with a therapist. It wasn't Sue. I rang CAMS to see why my therapist had changed. This was when they had informed me that Sue had left the service. This is where everything went back downhill. When I went to my new appointment with my new therapist, rather than start off on the right foot, they were 20 minutes late to my appointment. And yeah, I understand appointments run over, but as someone feeling like this was my worst nightmare. It was already hard enough to even get out of bed, let alone being out longer for someone with anxiety. The way my brain works is that there is a plan in my head on how I'm expecting my day to go. When that day doesn't go how it's planned, well, it's all over then. I simply can't go on with my day if one thing goes wrong. How was I expected to then trust this person when they couldn't even do their job and show up on time for my appointments? When I eventually got into my appointment, my anxiety was so bad that I could hardly speak or engage in conversation with anyone. This was one of many therapists I had, all following the same pattern of either showing up late to my appointment or cancelling appointments as late as up to a few hours before, and even some occasions when we turned up to the appointment and was informed that a cancellation letter had been sent out in the post, which we hadn't received. This would then affect my whole day, sometimes even my whole week, causing me to get extremely angry and have a meltdown. The person who would have to deal with this was my mother. She was the closest person to me, and I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone else. I mean, being a single mother with a severe mental health diagnosis must be hard enough on its own, let alone seeing your youngest child going through the same thing you went through, knowing how hard it was. My intentions were never to be angry with my mum, but what else was I supposed to do when phone calls to CAMS or the crisis team resulted in me being told to have a bath or go for a walk? How was I supposed to do either of these things when all that was going through my head was ending my life and how my family would feel if I left? I would constantly tell my mother that I couldn't go on living like this and I couldn't see me living much longer whilst I was feeling like this. After probably 20 cancelled appointments in total with CAMS and about 7 different therapists, not receiving the help that they were there to provide me with, the help that they were being paid to provide me with, I finally had enough. I decided that I no longer, that no, I couldn't leave this world. How was my mother supposed to live without her youngest daughter? How was my dog supposed to live without its mum? What really hit me was supposed to tell my nieces that I'd gone. How would they explain to them that the world was a cruel place and people that were paid to do a specific job couldn't help their 17-year-old auntie? After all these thoughts, I thought, no, enough is enough. So I decided to help myself to the point where I would force myself out of bed, to have a shower, to get ready, even if it was only to sit there and colour. I was doing far more for myself than CAMS have ever done for me. I fought and fought with CAMS. I just simply didn't understand the fact that they couldn't comprehend if I had killed myself, it would be down to them, simply because they couldn't be bothered to help an innocent young girl struggling. After many phone calls and quite a few complaints, made nothing change. I continued to help myself and eventually did get better. I finally seen myself smile for the first time in possibly 2 years. But there is only so long that happiness can last, and all of a sudden there I was again at rock bottom. I begged and begged CAMS to admit me to hospital simply for the fact that I didn't feel safe around myself. To be then told, well, we only tend to admit people when they suffer with something like an eating disorder, not depression. I don't know how sitting there and telling someone you want to kill yourself wasn't taken seriously. And writing this story, I still can't get my head around that. So after 3 years of CAMS not helping me, I finally turned 18. I made a wish on my birthday as I blew out my candles. Most girls my age would wish for a nice car or a nice bag. My wish was that I'd never feel that low ever again. So I'm currently now with adult services, hoping I'll get better with them. So after listening to my story, as you can tell, I haven't had the best experience. So if it was my choice, what would I want to happen? Well, it's simple. I'd want someone to sit there and say to me, it's okay, I'm going to help, you get better, just like I'd hoped CAMS would have said to me 3 years ago. So surely I didn't bring myself up on my own. Well, no, I didn't. I've got my brilliant mother to thank for that. My carer through all of this, who battled to try and help me while also trying to manage her own mental health with no support from services. This is my story. My name is Kira, and the one I have to thank for bringing me back up is my amazing mother, Sharon, the one who is reading this story to you. Then she ends with problems with the service, lacking consistency in care. Staff seem to have no lived experience of mental health. Staff who simply didn't seem to care and being paid for a job and not doing it. Then a separate heading, what needs to be done? Services need to speak to those who have lived experience and understand how their actions have huge consequences for young people. Involve people with lived experience when designing and improving services. So we heard this story in a partnership meeting. It probably resonated with us in much the same way that it has resonated with you. So the first thing we did, obviously, was reach out to Kira and her mother and ask to meet with them. So the CAMS Directorate leadership team and Rob, who can't be here today, met with Kira and her mother. And we also conducted our own investigation just to sense check some of what Kira had described to us. We have completed that. It's not right for me to share that today because today is about validating Kira's experience, but we have completed a separate investigation. Strategically, what we're doing, Kira had her experience in 2022. Strategically, what's happening around lived experience, which is central to this story, is that we set up a lived experience board in the care group with a number of different work streams. One of them is around advocacy, one of them is around PROMs and PEMs, and for people watching the video, PROMs are patient-reported outcome measures and patient-reported experience measures. Also, as part of the strategic mental health workforce plan, there is a national intent around the development of peer workers, and we have just recently recruited a lead around peer workers. We've got some small pockets of peer workers across our service, but strategically we're intending to develop more and to develop a recovery college. So we're doing lots of work around lived experience, developed a patient advisory board for young people, and learning from our experience at Tees Lydiard and extending that into community services. But specifically about Kira's story, just wanted to share a couple of slides that the directorate have developed in response. So they're quite wordy, so I'm not going to pull out everything. So since 22, there have been a number of changes to the CAMS service, separating out part 1 of the service and part 2, and being much clearer with people around expectations of the service that they're going to receive. Developed an in-reach school service, which would have really supported somebody like Kira. Could go to the next slide, Emma. I'm not going to read through all of those, but there is a lot of learning here around not only Kira's lived experience, but also the fact that we didn't know about Kira. So really trying to grow our advocacy services in CAMS, also really trying to promote listening and learning to complaints at the very earliest level. Again, our young persons advisory panel is there to support young people, and that's something that we're really trying to grow. Transition was a really important point for Kira, and it is completely unacceptable that she had a really trusting relationship with one therapist and then found herself with another therapist. So those transitions are inevitable. People do leave the service, but managing those transitions in a way that meets the needs of young people is something that we're very much working on. It's really important that we get experience right for young people, because a small number of those young people will go on to have lifelong contact with mental health services, and building that trust early is really important. If we go to the next slide, this is bits of work that we've still yet to do. So as Kira's story is fairly recent, we're going to be reviewing our clinic letters, developing information leaflets for young people, and managing the audit of clinic cancellations. Kira described what she says are 17 cancellations. Our records are a little bit different to that, but nonetheless, she certainly experienced cancellations, and that impacted on her. So we've got work to do around making sure that we audit and adhere to our standards around cancellations. And I will stop there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anna.
Shall I stay standing?
That's fine, thank you. And an incredibly powerful story, and it is really important for the board to be able to hear people's experiences, whether they're good experiences or whether they've been challenging and whether they've been, quite frankly, miserable. And it does demonstrate, doesn't it, as in so many walks of life, whether it's in healthcare services or elsewhere, the importance of communication. And when communication goes wrong, the consequences of that can be quite devastating for those people on the receiving end. So can I say how much I appreciate the fact that it also demonstrated the learning from that as well, along with, I suspect, many other experiences that the board gather. And it is assuring to know that when we are bringing in data, qualitative information from people about their experiences, that we are finding ways in which to reflect that in our planning and our development. Are there any questions to Anna or points on the slides? Geraint, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anna. Quite a lot of factors contribute to the experience of people like Kira, and hundreds of them in this area. And one of them you touched on, which was advocacy. And talking about the importance of consistency in communication, the advocacy services are not always as consistent and communicative as they should be. A lot of work was done on advocacy some years ago about the active offer. Can you say something about the consistency of the advocacy services?
Yeah. So in mental health services, there are two layers of advocacy, and for secondary mental health services, there's a statutory right to advocacy, and similarly for those people who are detained under the Mental Health Act. I think some of our learning is that much of that advocacy does tend to centre around our inpatient services, and that's why we've been doing work to promote it in our community services. And our lived experience board is the vehicle for us to receive that collective thematic learning through our advocacy services. The way the advocates previously worked is that they would share experiences on behalf of a young person or an adult with the team that was providing that care. And we didn't necessarily have that aggregate thematic learning, which we are now getting through our lived experience board. So yeah, advocacy is central to mental health services, is what I would say.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Lauren.
Thank you. So if you could pass on our thanks, Anna, to Kira in terms of allowing us to hear that story. And I think what it clearly articulates is that things that could be seen as a small blip by the service can really have that big impact. So cancellations, that lack of consistency in terms of the team, even just running late, clearly has a big impact on that young person. And just thanks, really. So I think the mental health services are really leading the way in terms of standing up and sharing stories when things don't go well. We had a similar story, well, a similar example in quality and safety didn't win.
Yeah.
But I think what the team really does is evidences the learning and the action that we're taking as a result. And I think you can see really clearly from the slides and what you've said, the huge strides that that are being made in mental health services.
Thanks, Laura. I agree. We are absolutely transparent. Just for board, it's not all about when things go wrong. We do also celebrate our success. Right? It's not just about that. These stories are important, but I do believe they are in the minority.
Yeah.
Lisa, thank you.
You've just answered my question, really. But thank you for Kira for sharing the story. It's really powerful. And it's heartbreaking that any young person should feel like that they're not getting any support. Sadly, I don't think it is a one-off story.
No.
I mean, certainly in the field I work, so lots of our children looked after, they don't get the support they need. And that isn't, to contact Morgana, it happens in other health boards as well, because I've worked in other authorities. Transition, I think, is really important. You touched on that, particularly when a child gets to 17 and then goes into the adult world. And sometimes we find that children get more support when they reach 18 because it's a different type of service. I don't understand the reasons behind that, but it is. And also that change of therapist has a huge impact because they have that trusted relationship and then he moves on. I'm just conscious that you've just recently been inspected. So that's obviously been a multi-agency thing because Merthyr Council was the authority that was done with it. Has there been a robust action plan in place to move forward on that so that we're not going to have repeats of this?
Yeah, so for board's awareness, there was a multi-agency review. It's a thematic review, so it's not an inspection of our service. In each health board area, so there'll be one local authority and health board and education as part of this thematic review. And we received fairly positive feedback verbally. The action plan, I'm expecting on my desk today for submission by Friday. So there are 3 parts to the action plan. There's a joint local authority and health part, there's a health part, and then a local authority part. So the action plan broadly was positive, but there were issues around ensuring we further enhance our lived experience. So things we're working on already are certainly in the action plan, and I'd be happy to bring that back to board once it's been submitted and accepted by the inspectorate.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions for Anna? No? Anna, thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. And can you please pass on the thanks to the entire board to Kira for allowing us to hear that story? It really is very important, and it's patient experiences are being used to help drive improvement. Fundamentally important is what we're about. So thank you very much. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll just move on to item 4. The chair's report, item 4.1. Report is for information, for noting, apart from those matters which require board approval, where the common seal has been used. Just to check to see if any questions on the chair's report. I've kept it quite brief. I have touched on the fact that, of course, that in the past month or so, we took the difficult decision as a board to centralise our stroke services in order to sustain a stroke service in the health board region. I wanted to, in the reports, but also this morning, to pass on my thanks to our staff, to the understanding of our patients and their families for that very difficult but very necessary decision. And it does, I suppose, act as a reminder as to the challenges that we face in delivering a number of our services, where we know some of those do face particular situations, particularly around staffing and resourcing and how those services are configured. So not the most ideal position for us to have been in. I don't like having to see decisions taken that are literally by default. I know we would rather control the future by planning effectively, but I think in circumstances it was the right decision to take to ensure that we continue to provide those stroke services in our region. But I'm very grateful to the executive team as well as all of our staff who have rallied to support that temporary change. I have touched on the fact that as this is the new year, obviously New Year's resolutions, I suppose, but that ambition that we have as a board to be better at what we do. There are lots of very exciting things that we are focusing on, not least the development of the Clantrison Health Park, but also the ambition to look at our services to realise how we can improve the offer that we have as a health system, to focus continuously on patient experience and to improve health outcomes for our population. That does require difficult decisions. It requires difficult conversations. It requires a huge amount of partnership working and engagement with our local communities. But I think that there is a huge ambition that we want to start realising this year as we plan the future shape of our services. So that's all I've got in my report, other than those matters that I needed to inform the board where we had applied, or rather used the common seal on contractual matters. Any questions on what I've said in the report? No, this board happy to note the report, but also to approve the use of the common seal on those contractual matters. Yep, thank you very much. Okay, just moving on to item 4.2, the Chief Exec's report. Paul, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So just to run through a couple of points from my report. So just on the escalation status, you'll know that the Health Board is currently in escalation in two areas. So enhanced monitoring around planning and finance, targeted intervention around performance. We've got another meeting next week with Welsh Government to just go through where we are on those areas. And there's also a tripartite meeting, I think, mid-February. So any changes to the escalation status of organisations will be communicated after that. I mean, what I would say is it's really positive to see the improvements in particularly the performance areas, particularly around cancer, where we know we're making good progress. And I'm definitely touch on that a bit later on in the performance report. And obviously, planned care is the area where we have got some challenges around the orthopaedic backlog. You'll all know that there was a plan to deliver it, but the roof issues at POW have slightly thrown that off course. Having said that, there's a lot of work going on to try and get our position back to as close as we can be by the end of March. And I think that might be part of what we're having a conversation about Cabinet Secretary in a minute, just to see where we are on that. But obviously there's a lot of national focus on improving the performance around the planned care trajectories. And it's positive also to see that the improvements are happening in cataracts as well, linked to the South East work we're doing with AB in Cardiff. More of our patients are now being offered alternative routes for getting their surgery, whether that's with the NHS or with outsourced private sector options. So we are seeing improvements in that. So it's good to see that the continuous improvement in those areas. The work on POW roof is what is going at pace, and I know we've got a session in a couple of weeks' time where colleagues are going to be running the session down at POW. IAMS will be able to go and see the work that's going underway there. Positive news is that the first phase of that work is completed and that the neonatal and maternity services are planned to be relocated back the week after next. So that is really, really positive. We've also been able to reaccommodate the ITU to free up the eye theatres there back to being operational for cataract surgery, which is good. And other things then now the next phase will be obviously starting quickly. So I mean, really positive to see how quickly that has all taken place, given that it wasn't that long ago that we were dealing with the decant. So thank you to everybody who's been really focusing on getting that work done, particularly our colleagues in States who've been obviously coordinating the contractors who are working on that. Also to say that we've got a number of other projects that are associated with the impact of POW, so the work that's going on at Hospital George Thomas to create more bed up there is happening. Work also starting on fitting out the ward at YCC to accommodate more bed capacity up there. So there is a lot of work going on across the Health Board from a estates and capital perspective Not least also the planning for the temporary theatres to be brought in at Lord Glamorgan. So pretty much every site of the hospital, of the health board at the moment, has got some element of work going on it, whether it's POW, PCH, RGH, YGT, YCC. When you go through it all, it's pretty incredible the amount of activity that is going on across the organisation, and also reflecting that all entails not just estates and technical colleagues, but also frontline clinical staff having to be moved around, people being reaccommodated in different locations. So really would like to thank everybody for all their hard work and effort that is being brought to bear to try and get capacity up and running as quickly as possible. And the positive news is we're starting to operate orthopaedic surgery again at the GLAM as of today even. So that is a really positive step forward as well. So really good to see that progress happening. And again, we've been running the hospitals with 70 odd less beds for the past few months. And clearly that's through the winter, Christmas and New Year period. It was a particularly challenging period over the New Year, and has been subsequently. But given the number of beds that we've been running without, the fact that we've been able to even keep everything going is a pretty testament to everybody's hard work and efforts to keep flow of patients moving through our site. So really, again, thank you to everybody for all of their hard work over the Christmas New Year period and during January, because we've been in some pretty tight positions over the past few weeks in terms of bed capacity and availability, but teams have been working really hard to try and keep patients moving and to get ambulances offloaded at the front door. So again, thank you to everybody. And finally, just to say, the Seren Awards, you'll see there, we include now every in my report, there's sort of updates. Really, really positive to see the Seren Awards continuing to bring forward lots of nominations from colleagues, nominating their peers or other people they work with for awards. And it's also a really great opportunity to see the breadth, a reminder of the breadth of what we do in the organisation and the important roles that people have in all sorts of walks of life for our community. So you'll notice there today the award that was in October, which was for one of our alcohol care practitioners. Again, a whole area of work that we're working on that is really, really important in that area. So really positive to see the continued improvement in our number of Seren Awards coming through. And there is also work going on at the moment, just starting to plan for an annual celebratory event to recognise staff from across the organisation. So yeah, just nice to be able to recognise colleagues despite all the pressures, to be able to recognise the contribution and hard work that people are putting in on a day-to-day basis. So that was all from me, Jeff.
Happy Paul. Okay. Any questions to Paul on his report? Kath?
Yeah, I think really good update, and to echo thanks to all staff around the winter pressures, and great to see the Seren Awards as well. I wondered, Paul, whether it'd be worth mentioning the MAG visit that we had on the 22nd of January, just to let the board know.
Yes.
We had obviously we haven't had written feedback yet, but we had immediate feedback after that visit.
Yeah, that's the challenge of writing this report.
A lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So colleagues will know that a couple of months ago, or previously, the First Minister, when she was Cabinet Secretary, requested and commissioned an external review into productivity and efficiency of the NHS in Wales. And she's brought together a team of people led by Sir David Sloman, who was the previous Chief Operating Officer of NHS England, been an experienced Chief Exec in the NHS in England. He's got a team of people from within England, but also colleagues from within Wales, who've been brought in to look at, across the NHS organisations in Wales, what opportunities are there to further improve productivity and efficiency. That has now been picked up by the current Cabinet Secretary, and they've been undertaking a series of reviews across the country, and our visit was last week. Yeah, last week, a long time ago. And they came to visit us, and they are focused on very clearly some specific areas around elective care, planned care, emergency care, cancer are the key areas of focus for them. They've been very clear to say they're not here to do an overall review of the efficiency of the whole NHS in general. It's very much targeted on those particular areas. So they spent time here at the Royal Glamorgan with colleagues in the emergency department and from the unscheduled care group, with colleagues from diagnostics, and Sally was there with them on the diagnostics work group, and also on planned care. We had, as Kath said, verbal feedback from the end of the visit, which was broadly really positive about the things they'd seen, some of the experiences that they've taken away. Very positive about the work we're doing with colleagues and local authorities on delayed transfers. Very positive about the work we've done in planned care to bring services together, such as the breast unit, and how that's driving efficiency and better experience for patients. But there will be areas, I'm sure, also which they flag where we can probably be doing more, which I think is helpful. But having talked to colleagues from other health boards, similar-ish feedback, I think, in many places. So the report is going to be coming back to the Cabinet Secretary in draft, I think, at the end of February, with a final report coming in at the end of March. So I would anticipate that from that there will be a range of recommendations that Welsh Government will be wanting to look at, working alongside health boards to implement. But I think, a really, really positive opportunity for us to show the things that we are doing, but also a recognition of where we want to improve and further develop what we are doing to improve our efficiency and access, particularly in reducing waiting time. So a really good opportunity, I think, to learn from external views on how we could do that.
Okay. Any other questions to Paul on this report? No. Okay. The board notes the report. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Item 5, board governance arrangements. Just to deal with the action log first, and if I can just ask whether or not colleagues have anything they want to raise in respect of the action log. There are a number of things there which confirm those matters that are in progress, those matters that we can remove from the action log. Any comments or queries about the information that's being taken there? No? Okay. If I just ask if colleagues can just note, we'll just note the action log for this meeting. Thank you very much. Are there any matters arising, just to double check, and nobody else has got anything that we need to flag beyond that under item 5.2? No, thank you very much. Item 5.3, right, the charitable funds annual report and annual accounts. Delighted that Sally is able to present this report. It's for approval this morning, and I will ask colleagues from Audit Wales. I see that Owen is with us and Mark is online, and so is Anthony. So good to see you all this morning. Obviously, once Sally has presented the report, I'll double check to see whether there are any other further comments from Audit Wales. But Sally, thank you very much. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I will turn to Owen to do any of the detailed presentation, but just as a sort of setting the scene, these accounts were considered by our last audit committee and supported, and so now brought to the board. Owen, did you want to come in terms of the detail?
Yes, certainly. So the charity accounts are due to be submitted to the Charity Commission tomorrow. So as the board act as trustees to the charity account, they're required to approve the annual report board and approve the signing of the letter of representation, which will go back to the Auditor General Wales early tomorrow for certification. Obviously the audit has taken place the back end of last calendar year. There are no uncorrected material misstatements, which means we've got an unqualified audit opinion, which is good news. There are a few small, which they call non-trivial, uncorrected misstatements, but they come to a total which is under material level and all get corrected due to the type of transaction they are. Will all get corrected in this financial year. So we have proposed not to correct those because they're corrected in 24-25. So they're shown within the report, that the cover report you've got, but also within the Appendix 2, which is the audit annual account Audit Wales report that's shown there. So so the accounts will be signed by approval at the board and the letter of representation, and we will submit then to Charity Commission tomorrow afternoon ready for the deadline date, which is tight, obviously, because of the date of the board this year. So yeah, that's it. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks, Owen. Much appreciated. Any questions from the board to Sally or to Owen? Yeah, Patsy, thank you.
And you'd say there was a full discussion on this at the Charitable Funds Committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not audit committee, I know I'm going the wrong committee.
Yeah, with all of us present and everybody was happy, and it was quite a detailed conversation as well that went through.
Thanks.
Do we want to ask
Questions?
the auditors?
Sorry, yes. Anthony and Mark, anything from yourselves?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just mention a couple of things briefly. Our report in the papers today, and me speaking now, discharges our responsibility to report to you before you consider signing, approving and signing the account and the letter of representation. Owen has given you a good update, so I won't repeat any of that. One thing I do mention each year to members is that our audit, in our report, we say the audit is substantially completed rather than it's completed. And that's because it's ongoing until the day of certification. So we are required to keep post-balance sheet event reviews ongoing. So, for example, if something hit the media in the morning that was quite significant relating to the charity and potentially related to 23-24 year of account, that could be something that would pause the AGW certifying the accounts tomorrow. So the audit remains open in that sense. And as part of that process, the responsible finance officer, the Sally, as the director of finance, is required on. Sorry. And in that respect, tomorrow, Sally, as the responsible finance officer, is required to contact us prior to the certification to confirm that she would still sign the same set of accounts tomorrow. In other words, Sally's not aware of anything significant that could affect those accounts. So that's part of tomorrow's process as well. That's important. A couple of quick things at the back of the report. There are two recommendations for this year, coming out of this year's audit. So that's quite low in terms of recommendations and reflects well on the quality of what was presented to us. And we also provide commentary on last year's recommendations, where we raised 4. And what we say in the follow-up is that 2 of those have not been implemented for 23-24, but we understand the reasons why. There was an unexpected loss of some key finance staff in the last 9-10 months, and that was certainly a factor in that respect. And I'll just close by thanking all the finance officers who helped us and the officers beyond finance who helped us during the audit, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mark. That's really appreciate it. Any questions to Audit Wales on the reports? No. Okay. In the absence of any questions or any further points, can I ask the board to approve the annual report and accounts? Thank you. Can I also ask for approval for the signing of the letter of representation in Appendix 2 of the Audit Wales Audit of Accounts report by the Chair of the Board and the Chief Executive? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Sally. Thank you to Owen, and thank you also to colleagues from Audit Wales. Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to item 5.4, the Board Assurance Framework. There's an update from Gareth, and I'll ask Gareth to introduce the report. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, John. Morning, everybody. So in terms of the Board Assurance Framework, just wanted to start by re-emphasising the importance of the Board Assurance Framework, obviously setting the scene for our strategic risks. And with the implementation of the new committee structure, I think it's getting more visibility in terms of both agenda planning for those committees and also at the new SDC and ODC committees on the risk update report, which we present to members as well. So we really do view this as a really integral part of setting agendas and ensuring that members of the board have sufficient visibility of it on an ongoing basis, not just at the board meeting itself. Underpinning this, of course, the organisational risk register itself, and again, the full version of that is taken to Audit and Risk Committee on a regular basis, and the underlying data behind that is also available in admin control. So I'll just draw members' attention to section 3 of the report as usual, which outlines the substantive updates to the board assurance framework on this occasion, and in terms of decreases in risk scores, particularly around risk 10 and risk 6. The risk 10 is around the failure to plan and manage revenue resources within our revenue resource limits, and clearly due to additional financial support that we received from Welsh Government, this risk is now reducing to what it was the last time we presented it to the board. So I think everyone just needs to be mindful of that and understand the reasons for it. And then strategic risk 6, which is around leadership and management, that has decreased from a risk of 12 down to a risk of 8, which actually means it's now at its target score. So we are proposing that that risk is closed. And there has been some discussion on that at the strategic development committee as well. So again, it's not the first time some members will be seeing that. The BAF remains a dynamic document, so it changes, things come on it, things go off it as well. And in terms of some of the discussions we've had in recent months, previous board meetings, we talked about the development of a new strategic risk around capital and estates. And Sally and myself have had some initial discussions around what that risk might look like. And it's there in 3.6 and broken into 2 component parts really about the importance of maintaining a safe and fit for purpose estate infrastructure in the here and now, but also developing a fit for purpose future estate to reflect the future clinical service model which the health board may adopt into the future. So there is further work going on within Sally's directorate, obviously supported by myself and my directorate in terms of bringing that risk to life, and obviously being in part of a future update to the board assurance framework, which obviously will come to this meeting in due course as well. In terms of the updates to the risks themselves, I think it's fair to say obviously recent events, both in terms of the roof situation at POW and obviously the operational pressures faced through the winter, has impacted some of the updates to the risks on this occasion. But just to reassure you that where there are delays in updates, that they will be updated in the next iteration that you receive in the board assurance framework. All that set out in the paper, I just wanted to draw members' attention to it. So I'm looking for colleagues to note the overall report, but approve the closure for risk 6.
Thank you, Gareth. Okay. Any questions to Gareth on the report and any observations? And Kath and then Patsy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Really good to see some of the risks coming down in score as well, and being taken off the back as well. Note what you say about the estates. I think it'd be really good to see that on the next board's iteration, if we can articulate that and we can move forward on that. So we know there's progress being made on that. I guess it was something that I think I brought up in another board, which was around, do we need a strategic risk around moving services from secondary to primary care and that kind of what we're calling after shift left? And I still wonder whether we need to consider whether we do need a more strategic risk around that to look at, because it is something we're really focusing on, isn't it, around our community primary services and how we can take the pressure off the hospitals that we've got. So I just wonder if we can still have a sort of think about that really. Would that be all right?
No, I'll come back to that now. I think it's how we define a risk, or how we define that in understanding the range of different challenges of developing, I suppose, what is our community-based service offer, which involves primary care, obviously, but it's probably broader than that. So we've started some of that strategic discussion planning work. And for me, it's how that sits in the wider discussion about what our hospitals do in the future, which comes back to the work that Linda's led on around the acute clinical services plan. So it's how we capture. I see where you're coming from. I absolutely see where you're coming from. It's how we capture that, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think in some ways, if you were to describe a risk around that, it would be the risk that primary care doesn't have the capacity to deal with what we're looking to. So yeah, I think I get what you're saying there, Jeff. So I guess it's, as you say, John, it's how would we describe what the actual risk is? Because there's risks from capacity in community and primary to be able to deliver it, and there's risks of not wanting to So yeah, leave that point with
Also
us.
the risk of not doing it. I suppose,
Yeah, well,
you know.
exactly.
Yeah,
It's
that's
the thing
right,
as
yeah.
well.
Lots of continued
So yeah, we
consequence
need to give
in
a
our
thought
hospital.
to how we frame that, because in
Yeah.
some ways that's a risk around the strategic direction that we're looking to split. So we need to just perhaps think through how we frame that.
Kathy?
Yeah, and you know, we've had this conversation a couple of times, and I've been, and there's part of me that thinks this is actually more of a control, in terms of addressing the risk. So our risk is we're not able to meet the needs of the population's health.
Yeah.
One of the control pieces that we can put in place is changing our service model to deliver integrated care as a key bit of meeting the needs of the population. So I think I've been struggling with it, because you're right, there are risks associated with non-delivery of it, and there are risks absolutely to the delivery of it. But the program of integration for me is far more a control to meet our strategic obligation of meeting the needs of our population, rather than a risk in itself. And so I think it would be helpful for us to unpack that one a bit more.
Patty?
Yeah, I think some of the point really, but it's good to see this continue to be a live document, firstly.
Yeah.
Secondly, the second point on paragraph 3.6, developing a future estate to reflect the clinical services model. You need to be very careful we're not preempting the outcome of the work on the clinical services model, or assuming that we're preempting it, because we don't really know what it's going to look like until that work has been done. So is the risk more around ensuring the infrastructure is adaptable or something? Because we can't say what it's going to be, can we? Because we don't know yet.
Thanks, Patsy. I think there are two. I think you're right. It's how we describe both of those risks. The first one, for me, is around the assurance that the board should have, perhaps at this point might not have, around the quality of our existing estate, and whether, in terms of what we own as a health board, is doing what it should do. What are the conditions in which these buildings are situated? What are the staff that are working out of them, the patients who perhaps have been cared in them? So that for me is the assurance bit about what we currently have in its current state. And this, I suppose, part of this falls out of the discussion that we had when the roof at Princess of Wales Hospital clearly became a major risk to the hospital site. So for me, this is that bit is around the assurance the board should have about its current estate and what it's there to do. And the second bit, you're right, that is, in a sense, anything that falls out of decisions that we take about the future shape of our healthcare services. Obviously, it needs to take into account what we own as a health board, because there may well be some buildings that we will need to make a different use of in the future to support the sorts of innovation and change that we want to see out in the community. There may be some buildings in the future the health board determines that it simply does not need. But yeah, I think that second bit is that future planning bit. The first bit for me is where we are currently, and I think that's the important bit that does need to be worked on. I think quite
The
rapidly.
first bit relates to what we know, which is our assessed, which is is very much just an estimate. It's once you go into a building, you always find more, but the estimate of our backlog is 108 million.
Yes.
Our allocation in recent years out of our discretionary has probably been 2 to 3 million of this sort of. I think 3 years ago we had 8 million for our discretionary for the whole year. Anything else was major capital. So you can see in that terms, our backlog is significant. And what we get, we have to either use our discretionary, an element which also funds digital equipping and a whole range of other things. And we also need to bid for all Wales capital. So that 108 million does not include anything to do with the ground and first floor of PCH, which was part of a major capital scheme. That's excluded.
Callie.
I was going to mention this under the report from Quality and Safety, but I think one of the things that would be useful for us to talk about, perhaps in a development session, is how we
so in the meetings I'm involved in, there's constant discussion about estates and equipment. And the danger is that in the committee or board, we tend to get into too much operational detail, which we shouldn't. But I think the reason we're getting into that is because we don't have that assurance that there is an overall plan, or that these issues can be resolved in some way. And it's understanding the role of the board and the committees in helping with that, without getting into too much of the detail. But it is constantly coming to committees, certainly ones that I'm involved with, that people don't have the right equipment or the estate is not fit for purpose. So how do we
So there are a couple of
manage
different
that?
bits in that, aren't there?
Yeah.
Equipping isn't always capital.
Yeah.
In fact, quite a lot of it isn't. It has to be over 5k and have an asset life of more than 12 months to be capital. So we do not have enough money. We are never going to have enough money to fill 108 million backlog.
Yeah.
And we've got our churn of equipment. So we have to focus on risk. That's why when we put in our 10-year capital plan last year, the prioritisation, we had to go through a risk assessment process. So we look at the backlog around that. Equipment quite often gets funded directly by Welsh Government during the year, late in the year. We've had a lot of money late in the year this year.
Yeah.
When I say a lot, I mean 20, 30, 40 million has come through during the year. So we are constantly looking at what are the highest risk equipping issues, and anything else that Gethin comes up with as a service change, like surgery queue. He's trying to look innocent at this stage, but it's not. But there is not enough money to address all of our risks, and we need to know that. So we have to focus on our highest risks and the most critical elements. And the other challenge, of course, is how do we deliver a capital programme in a live hospital environment? So one of our sort of challenges into next year, there's a targeted estates fund. It was an investment fund, but it's now estates, a TEF, which is where we bid for money around backlog, health and safety, infection prevention control, and mental health. And one of our high risks will be the air handling units in the theatres at RGH. But in order to complete that work, we'd have to close the theatres. Gethin is not that keen on that as a concept, but we may have an opportunity with having the Vanguard on site to be able to do some of that. We do have to chat, all the time. We are delivering, aren't we? Pressurised services, and the ability just to shut things down and then to do the work. It's really difficult. So there's a constant juggling act here.
So, I mean, just picking back on Carolyn's point, I do think it might be worth a conversation, because what we're describing here is played out across all the other health boards as well. Everyone's got the same challenge, and there's quite a bit of conversation going on at the moment within the chief exec group about, are there different ways? Because frankly, we will never have enough capital money either to fund the backlog of what we've got now, or indeed to think about any future developments that we want to do across the NHS in Wales. So we're going to have to think a bit more laterally about whether there are different routes to capital that may involve partnerships or whatever. So there's a lot of conversations going on about that topic. They all come with different pros and cons and different thoughts. But I think just trying to carry on as we've done for many years, as Sally's described, with just scraping together little bits of money. When you look at the scale of the backlog across the whole of the NHS in Wales, there is no way there's going to ever be enough capital money for within public sector capital to do that. And candidly, this isn't just a Welsh problem. This is a same issue in the NHS in England as well. So, but there are things we can do. I think the other thing we need to challenge ourselves about is as well, do we need to more rapidly look at disposals and consolidation of sites? Because we are running a lot of sites, many of which are not in great nick, and we're at risk of spending a load of money on backlog on places where really, we probably, if we're honest, and better off getting out of and trying to dispose of them. So I think, one of the things we might want to think about, and again, this links back to the future clinical services model, is is there a state that we would actually rather than pour money on precious capital money on maintaining it.
It's probably worth flagging as well, though, that this year we will now have our largest ever capital programme, partly reflecting of spending approximately 16.5 million in year on the roof programme and associated works. But we've gone from, I think, an opening CRL of around 54 million to around 92 million this week. It says 87, but it's gone up again since then. We keep getting letters. And that's great because it gives us the opportunity to spend capital, particularly in digital. We're doing quite a lot of work and in equipping, but also it's a real challenge because that's all coming in the latter part of the year. And we've got a small number of people trying to procure, implement and everything else with all of that kit. So next year looks more positive capital wise after the UK Gov budget announcements, but thereafter possibly we revert less ready capital. And what we've been told is in our major capital schemes, finishing PCH, so phase 2 is in flight now, but phase 3 is still to come, and Lantris and Health Park are the two things that they will prioritise for us. That means they will deprioritise almost everything else.
Just a final point, not to prolong this. I understand, and I think there are varying scales to this discussion, aren't there? There are huge capital investments, there are ongoing backlog maintenance, all of that, and some of the issues that come up through the committees are completely at the other end. People saying, I turn up to a ward and the patient's not got a chair, or they haven't got a sliding board and all the rest of it. So that's a different, no, I know that's not capital, but what I'm raising is the whole overall issue of estates and equipment, and what should we discuss where. And at a committee, we shouldn't necessarily be debating those things, but if they're coming up to us, there's a reason it's coming up to us. So it's trying to understand where those things are best handled and what the overall strategy is, for example, for small pieces of equipment, which make a huge difference.
Well, so a couple of things on previous items. Firstly, it should go back to the risk associated with that lack of equipment. So we should, frankly, there are tendencies, perhaps sometimes we get things saying, oh, if we escalate it, we'll get the bit.
I'm very conscious of that.
Exactly.
I think we need to understand
it needs to be a risk. It needs to be a risk-based judgment. Secondly, there are, as Sally said, some of this is revenue funding. And it's that local teams to look at what they think they could do. The other thing I'd say is, there is charitable funds as well. So if there are some things that aren't available to be funded through our own revenue resources, there are opportunities for people to bid for charitable funds for appropriate things. So I think we need to try and challenges that everyone's got a need. We know that, and it's trying to prioritise it. And that's why I go back to the risk as well, to make sure that we are
just sticking with 3.6 for a moment. So in terms of crafting these particular risks, I know Kath mentioned earlier about whether we could return to this at the next board meeting at the end of March. I appreciate there's also a huge amount of work being done at present around the development of our IMTP and also our plans for investing money in the next financial year, 2025-26. But I do think, particularly around the safety fit and purpose, the state infrastructure is something that we should, as a board, return to as quickly as we can. Just in terms of that assurance piece. And I know, Sally, we know the backlog figures, but I think it might be worth just thinking about how we again just try and give that risk a bit more certainty in how we're going to capture it.
I wonder whether, because we probably have a limited time of having Tim Burns, who's got huge experience in our state available to us. He stayed on in order to finalise the roof programme. So I wonder whether a board development session that starts to go through some of what the issues are, because I think there's a bit about, we see things, don't we? We see the obvious stuff, but understanding the infrastructure and our staff compliance elements around, electrical infrastructure, the challenges of air handling units, fire safety, I think will give you a different perception of the risks and what we're handling.
So we have a board development session in February, which is focusing exclusively on the development of our IMTP. We will then have a board development session in April. So I think this would be probably, if it's possible, that time works out. If that would be okay. It would be good to return to this. I think it's I think go back to Paul's point. Are there, again, this is for the exec to advise. But are there parts of our estate that we have that we simply think we will not need in the future? I mean, obviously there's a question around those things that we think we might want to reprofile in terms of what they do as we start to move our services around. But if there are those buildings that we simply think we will not need, then for me it is, I suppose, the pace at which us we as a board are able to advance that disposal programme, because we do own quite a lot of buildings, 40 plus, I think, in terms of totality. So yeah, so I think having more of a view around that would be useful as well. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the changes to the board assurance framework? Can I just also put on record some thanks, particularly around strategic risk 10, which is the failure to plan and manage revenue resources within the resource limit set by government. That risk has decreased now, and the score has decreased from 20 to 16. I mean, this is, as we've been discussing through part of this discussion this morning, managing resources is incredibly difficult, particularly when there are huge challenges that we face, huge demand pressures, not least moving people and services and patients around in order to accommodate the work that we're undertaking at the Princess of Wales Hospital. It is reassuring at this stage in the financial year, knowing how much effort has been put into sound financial management in the course of the year, that we've seen the score reduced for this particular risk. So my thanks to Sally, but the entire team really for the work that's been done in managing what has been a very difficult set of circumstances. Nothing else from me on the paper, but any other questions or comments? Gareth, anything want to come back on?
Just to have the
Is the board happy to approve the board assurance framework and the changes that have been included? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 5.5, the board committee and advisory group highlight reports. We'll start with the Quality and Safety Committee, as was styled at that point, on the 19th of November, and I'll ask Carolyn to provide an update on those matters that need to be escalated to the board. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. I will take the report as read. Obviously, this committee meeting was some time ago now. Just to highlight, one thing I just want to highlight about the committee overall is that I think the quality of reports and presenters we get into that committee is excellent. I think from clinical execs, from the care groups, the quality of the reporting has improved, a lot. It's very, very positive and very helpful, because there is always an awful lot to get through, and people are very good with those reports. So I want to thank people for that. For this November meeting, we continue to receive listening and learning stories as we have today, and we certainly find them hugely beneficial, some positive, some not so positive, but all reflecting on the learning that's come from people's experiences. This one was about music and the impact on care of the elderly patients, and it was really very inspirational, the difference it had made to people. So you're pleased to hear that. We noted at that point the reduction in boarding of patients, which had been the discussion at the committee on a number of occasions, and also obviously wanted to commend, as we all have, the immense effort of teams in their response to the critical incident at Princess of Wales. We had a spotlight report on sexual safety and safeguarding, and that was discussed in some detail. And you'll also note under the Assure session that we noted the approach being taken to implement measures around that, which the committee duly noted. I think everything else there is just to note, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Carolyn. Much appreciated. Any questions to Carolyn on the highlight report? Any? Don?
It wasn't really a question. It was just to drag out a bit from there. The safeguarding team, I don't think we're quite giving the credit they are. We're in a very different place, I think, now, and hopefully, Karen, you've seen that from the committee, that we have got really good leadership by Claire O'Keefe. We've got a new named doctor in Dr. Emily Payne, and things just seem very different from a few years ago when we were having quite a few issues coming in that area. So I think there's strong leadership now. And this is an example of the fact that we think about safeguarding, we tend to think about paediatrics and vulnerable adults. There's a lot more to it than that. So I think this sexual safety part really did bring that to the forefront. So it's just well known really that the team have done a fantastic job, and credit to them.
Thanks, Tom. Lisa?
Can I just add to that? Claire and Emily both sit on the safeguarding board, and they are fantastic. So really positive. So the go to positive feedback.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. We'll note the update provided. Thank you, Carolyn. We'll now come to the next iteration of the committee, the Quality, Safety and Experience Committee, which met on the 21st of January. And again, I'll ask Carolyn if there's an update to the board. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you. Again, we'll take the report as read. Matters to escalate or alert. We have a pressure ulcer prevalence audit. That was a comprehensive presentation we received. We noted the details of that. We do spend quite a lot of time looking at the impact of work being undertaken, both on pressure ulcers and falls. We look forward to hearing back from the improvement board about how those actions are impacting. I won't talk about equipment because we've already discussed that. We talked about some of the significant challenges in the Adult Mental Health Directorate due to vacancies and sickness, and noted the contingency plans being developed there. Stroke services we've already discussed, and obviously that was discussed in detail at quality and safety. And other than that, I think I'm happy just to take questions.
Thanks, Carolyn. Okay, any questions to Carolyn on the update report? No? Okay, we'll note the report. Thank you very much. Moving on to the Digital and Data Committee, which met on the 29th of November, and I'll ask Ian to provide an update on committee's work. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. And this is the last report from this committee, as members will know, because this has now been the work of this committee has now gone into two other committees, which is the operational and the strategic ones. Initial feedback on the operational, so that happened this week. Very positive actually, and I'm very impressed by the discussions that took place in that particular committee. So it's working well so far. So that's initial feedback. But back to this one, we just want to focus on positive escalation of two points. And one is the enormous response that took place with the critical incident at Bridgend, the Princess of Wales Hospital, as part of the digital team. And I think people might not be aware of this, aware of all the other stuff that goes on, but the huge amount of work that was going on sort of behind the scenes to enable that to happen from a digital and data point of view, I think was discussed in a bit of detail in that meeting. And really congratulations to those people involved in that. Also as well, special commendation to the team to do with the Bridgend disaggregation. This has been going on for years, as people will know. A small team dealing with this with little additional resource in order to do that. They're at the point now where the infrastructure activity is almost completed. So really, congratulations once again to that team for getting to a position where we're almost at the point where that is completely taking place. And those are the main things I wanted to bring up. There's other things in the report which people can read as well.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, any questions to Ian on the update report? Well, it's good to get the feedback on how the new arrangements are starting to work. Admittedly, we're only 1 month in, but if we're getting good feedback on one month in so far, I'm happy to hear that.
Yes.
No, the question. Thank you, and thanks for what you said about the experiences of having seen the response to the challenge of particularly Princess of Wales. So thank you for that. Nothing else? Okay, no, thank you very much. We'll note the report. Thank you. The Mental Health Act Monitoring Committee report of the 4th of December. I think, Geraint, I think you were in the chair for that meeting.
I believe I was. The only matter to bring to your attention has already been raised in a previous board, which is around the electronic recording system. But I believe that is in hand. The report will be business cases to be brought to the board. But it is a long-standing issue. It is not new to you. So it looks as if that's the chief executive.
I knowing that this question would no doubt come up today, I've checked to see where we were. We are just waiting for the money's been signed off at Welsh Government. We're just waiting for the allocation letter. So I did chase that, and I'm assured that it's with the Minister to help set to sign the actual.
Yeah, I've been told that it's coming this week. Noting that it's Thursday today, but and we haven't received it, but should be this week.
But we are constantly chivvying to get because we know we need to get on with that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to know. Geraint, anything else?
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Thank you. The board will note the report. Thank you very much. The People and Culture Committee had that report on the 5th of December. And Dilys, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this was the last meeting of the People and Culture Committee before the new committee structure comes in place. And I'm very pleased that there are two positive escalations coming. Excuse my coming from the committee. The shared listening and learning story was very inspiring. The way the team had taken on the approach to the staff survey, and it played a key role in the staff survey. So congratulations to them. The other one was the Welsh Language More Than Just Words report. Amazing what work they are doing, such a small team, and it just goes to show the commitment to the Welsh language from the team and the health board. So I'd really like to congratulate that team. There is one item in the in the advice section. I'd like to mention the work on the leadership programme. We've already heard this morning that the risk has been reduced as a result of the work, and I'd like to congratulate Howell and his team on the way the leadership programme has been rolled out.
Thank you for this, very helpful, and thanks to all those who contributed to the People and Culture Committee and also to the Digital and Data Committee. And I'm just checking any questions or comments on the other report. No. Thank you. And thanks for the reference about the work the Howell's team have done in that leadership space. It's really good to see that coming through. Okay, we'll note the report. Thank you. Moving on to item 5.5.6, the Local Partnerships Forum, and I'll invite Howell just to give an update on the LPF work. Thank you, Howell.
Yes, so I again assume members have read the report, and I think the one escalation on there is probably not a board escalation. It's more one for me and my team to pick up with ops colleagues. So nothing more to say than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Howell. Any questions to Howell on the update report? No, thank you. Okay, we'll note the report. Many thanks. The Strategic Development Committee. So the Strategic Development Committee, one of our new committees, met on the 16th of January, and although it was only a couple of weeks ago, we did decide to include this on this agenda as well. So I'll ask Kath to provide members with an update on those matters that were discussed for the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a good meeting, I think. I was really impressed by the collation of the papers, and I think also thank you to the governance team as well for collating all the actions from the other committees that then fed into the strategic committee. So I think that was really, really positive as well. We covered an awful lot actually, but I think in terms of what to alert and escalate, we had an agenda item on the acute clinical services plan, and I think what we were asking for the future was really to understand what the timelines are, noting absolutely around the engagement and consultation that's going to be needed around this sort of transformation programme. So, and I think also noting that this is a longer term service plan and changes, and we're not actually going to start really sort of motoring on this probably till 26, 27. But it was, but really, I think understanding our timelines around transformation around all our health services, including the clinical services plan, is really important. So I wanted to kind of raise that. Also, we looked at the healthy travel plan, which we know how important travel is for everybody, and looking at the healthy travel plan was really welcomed, particularly the regional focus around that. We also wanted to raise the bilingual clinical provision strategic plan for 5 years, where there was an amazing amount of work done, which actually mapped where we've got the Welsh language operating across the hospitals and across our services, which was just amazing, I thought, and really shows where we've got really good coverage and also where we've got gaps. So again, just wanted to note that. And then the Creating Health Strategic Delivery Plan also gave us good assurance around that programme as well. So we were really pleased. So those were all under our escalate and alert. And I think just to comment as well, I think we've got it probably further down on the agenda, but around the work going on around the integrated community services programme as well, just noted all the really good progress going on there as well. So
thanks.
Is that all right? Because we covered a huge amount,
No,
but I'm just trying to pick out the escalate and alert rather than.
I appreciate that. Any comments or questions, Kath, on the committee highlight report? Geraint, you?
I have a very brief and insubstantial comment to make.
I doubt it.
Which is something you and I touched on earlier this week.
Yeah.
Is there any way we could call this plan something a bit more user friendly than the acute clinical services plan? It was just a comment. I haven't got a suggestion. Something else.
Ours is on a postcard.
I suppose if you think about where we've got to with the development of this work, we're also looking at other areas of work, such as the shape of our community services, some of which, of course, is reliant on us potentially moving services away from hospital sites closer to where people live. So I suppose it's whether we style it as a healthcare delivery plan or something of that nature. But I think, yeah, when it is more than just about the shape of our acute services, isn't it? I suppose when we look at the breadth and depth of the work we're undertaking, so it's whether we try and capture that and the one sort of all-encompassing title, as Linda said, answers on a postcard. But I'm sure we can look at that, and it's the language and how we style and describe things is really important when we start to have those conversations. As they start, we're already having conversations with our communities, but how we advance those conversations, that people understand what it is we're talking about when we talk about change. And this isn't just about the hospital environment, is it? It's much bigger than that. So that's very useful comment. And I did say to Geraint this week that obviously, Linda, I know we've appointed a new program director, and I'm looking forward to meeting him next week. But one of the great things about the strength of our health boards at board level is that we have 3 independent members, all of whom have a community focus. So we have an IM community, which is Rachel. We have IM third sector, which is Dilys, and we have Geraint as our local authority representative. So, but there are 3 people who all have a role that is rooted very much in our communities. And I think what I would like to do certainly is, once Dr. Ali has started in post on the 1st of February, is perhaps arrange a discussion with certainly independent members who have that community focus, because how much of this succeeds, probably all of it, really does rest on not just the active engagement of leadership of our staff, but the engagement of our communities and the public. And that really is fundamentally important. So having, I think, some of those early conversations with our new program director would be, I think, would be really helpful. So I'm sure we can arrange that.
Yeah, just a quick comment. As I said earlier, that we know the Digital and Data Committee split its work 2 ways. This committee is where some of the other work has gone. I'm not on this one, but I'm glad to see that it's picking up the strategic stuff in there. So just pleased. That's all.
That's good. No, thanks, Ian. Absolutely good to hear. Dilys, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do attend both committees, and both initial meetings of the committees were quite well run and very well chaired. I've got to compliment my fellow IMs on the way they chaired the meetings. Considering they're so new, I think they were quite well. 1 or 2 little things you might need to look at, but they were quite well like that.
Okay, well, thanks. Okay, any other comments or questions in respect of the strategic committee? No. Okay. Right, we're going to move on to item 6. We are running ahead of time. I've just probably jinxed it. There's no sort of somewhat different to the board meeting at the end of November, where this room felt like a bus station with members of the exec team leaving and arriving, because of course we had the Welsh Government's Investment Board meeting happening at the same time, and Linda, Gethin, Sally and Paul were in and out to ensure that we were advancing the case for the Llantrisant Health Park. So hopefully this meeting is probably running a bit more smoothly, but as I said, I probably just jinxed it by saying that. We are going to move on to item 6, however, in respect of delivering our plan and our integrated performance dashboard. So the part 1 of this obviously is to look at our performance in respect of delivery. And as usual, I'm going to start by inviting Linda just to open this particular item. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you. So as you know, there's an ongoing approach to improving what we bring to your attention and how. And as I said to the OGC earlier this week, there's one change that we have made on this report, which is if you go to page 4 of 40, sorry, I can't see what, 182 of the whole pack. We've introduced a new summary. So these are overall kind of the top 15 flashing light things that if you want to know anything about where we are, these are the ones to go to. And in the middle of operational performance there, we've introduced a fifth one because one of the areas of performance that has been a particular worry, and it is fully reported in the pack, page 17 there, is that of how we manage people with hip fracture. So for which you have to have an orthogeriatrician, fracture liaison services, and things that we haven't had, and things that are improving because there has been some investment, although that investment will need to continue. But the way we decided, so Dom and I sat them down and had a think about this, and there are 24 KPIs in fact for hip fracture, and at the moment 17 of those are red. I mean, previously even more would have been red, but we thought the best way of perhaps pulling it up and highlighting it would be for you to see how many are red now, and we hopefully will track that as a reducing number. As I say, all the detail is still in the report as it always has been, but it's an attempt to just bring this one to your attention because it is one where we felt that the board should be more cited. The only other thing I'm going to say is about the next. So Gethin, Stuart and I, our teams are trying to work to, as you know, to cut back on the narrative in this report. It's a bit, it's long because people haven't had, what Winston Churchill said, sorry for the long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. It's that sort of, you have to put time into giving. So I know Gethin's working with his teams to make sure that where their reports come through, they're focusing on the what the actions are and what the impact's going to be where there's a deficit. So we're still working on that, so that should improve. But anyway, that was, so in terms of the report, that was my introduction. And I guess I always forget who we hand over to next, but that's why we have a chair.
I've got my list, so thanks, Billy. Thanks, Linda. I'm going to come to Gethin now to look at just to talk us through the operational performance section report. I know that Paul mentioned some of the some reference earlier to the cancer services. I know that colleagues will probably want to touch on that, as well as how we're managing the drive towards, particularly in particular that 104-week target, which we've all been set as health boards. And I know there's a huge amount of work being done at the moment to address that. But Gethin, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Excuse me, thanks, Jack. So I will take the performance report and just throw out a couple of key highlights, but happy to take any detailed questions. So if I start with urgent care, we have seen a dip in performance for our performance in December compared to November. Although it is worth just noting that is still higher than December last in 2023, despite the fact we saw well over 1,500 more patients in month than December 23. So we have seen significantly more patients in that 4-hour window than in the previous year. We have, however, seen a challenge in ambulance handover delays during that period, and our over 12-hour waits in ED have increased. And this is partly related to the sort of feeling the real heat now of the loss of the 75 beds within our system, and has been challenging, and that has continued into January. We've had 2 periods in January of business continuity, where we've had to put in other measures to sort of manage the level of demand being experienced at our front door and ensuring timely access to care. So in terms of what are we doing, so the key focus for us at the moment is one, making sure that those patients that we can manage on a same-day emergency care pathway, we are managing. We did have our STAMP programme launch in December in the Royal Glamorgan, and that worked really well. We are in the process of resetting it post sort of the real pressures, but that was highlighted by the MAG visit as an exemplar of excellent practice, both in terms of its development or its initial deployment at Prince Charles, and we've really seen in Prince Charles the impact of stamp being sustained through that winter period. So it is I think a really positive development, and we will be rolling that out to Princess of Wales, launching that in February. So it is the approach we'll take for acute medicine on all 3 sites. We have seen an uptick in surgical demand during that period as well, and we are managing an immense volume of patients through our surgical assessment units as well. So it has been very high demand. Linked to that, and we've had some really good learning through the BCI process around some improvement work we're going to do around pathway 1s. So those patients that are moving, being discharged home with packages of care. Lisa wasn't on the call this morning, but we've agreed on a sort of focused improvement piece, because we know we are seeing once patients are handed over to brokerage, we're seeing really quite timely implementations of packages of care. We've also got increasing capacity coming on stream week by week with CTM Hospital at Home. And what we need to do is make sure that process from identifying the patient it has potentially going to have a pathway 1 need to being handed over to brokerage. There's some focused improvement work we can make in there to really reduce that delay period, because what we know is once we get the patient properly boxed up, the package is being procured really quite quickly. So we've agreed, the 3 local authorities and ourselves, to do some focused improvement work on that. We've set ourselves the ambition to have the lowest pathway 1 delays in Wales. So and particularly with the investment we're making into Hospital at Home, I think that we've got to realise that ambition. The next focus then clearly will be on the pathway 2s, pathway 3s, which are more complex prioritisation. That's absolutely the key focus. In terms of cancer, really pleased that we've seen that continue improvement step by step. So our performance was up to 61.2%. And in that period, and that's the highest performance we've had since May 21 on our cancer performance, which is really important. I'm thrilled that we actually hit 91.2% compliance with the single cancer pathway in our breast services. If you think 2 years ago when I was sat at the board, we had a 26-week wait for an urgent outpatient appointment in breast. We are now seeing, diagnosing and treating 91% of those referrals within 62 days. Is such an extraordinary improvement. So massive thanks to the clinical team and the support team that are delivering that. I think what it absolutely demonstrates, however, is that when we have that conversation and engagement with the clinical teams about what will make the service work better, and absolutely, the key enabler for this is about the bringing together of those teams into a single centre of excellence, giving them the resources, the physical resource to do the job, has absolutely delivered such an improvement to the outcomes for our population. So I think it is really, really important. We heard Zoe shared a patient story with us, a very sad patient story, but a patient who had received, first found a breast lump, and from there to starting chemotherapy had taken 3 weeks. And we had seen, diagnosed, and started treatment within 3 weeks. And that is just testament to the whole MDT and the delivery of that. So it is really, really important. We've got to repeat that now in all our other tumour sites, and how we do that. Data we've got 2 days to close until January's numbers, but as of today, December's performance is showing 93.5%. So again, making that incremental improvement. Yeah, we're trying our hardest to get as close to 70% as we can by the end of the year. I think that's going to be a challenge, but the teams are working really hard to achieve that. The one risk to flag, I think it's fair to say, is fragility in our pathology services that link to that. So if that's one of the areas that we've got to look at support for longer term, both in terms of digital pathology solutions, but actually regional working. And we're working very closely on that. In terms of planned care, as Paul has already alluded to, we were aiming to deliver 0 for our 104-week waiters. We have got a risk cohort in orthopaedics. We are trying to make that risk cohort as small as possible by the end. So we've got we've agreed some capacity with Cardiff and using some. So they've got some areas that we will just need to provide the scrub team for. They can offer us other capacity if we provide the whole clinical team. So we're working that through with them at the moment. But all other specialties are on track to hit 0 for over 104-week waiters by the year end, as per our original plan. We're doing that in the context of having lost 10 operating theatres, and the vast majority of these patients are waiting operations. So I think again, massive testament to the teams that have stepped up, doing evening lists, weekend lists, doing all sorts in order to make sure that these patients are treated. So it is that commitment to the whole health board, and it being I also will draw out the continued improvement in reducing waits in diagnostics. So again, across our diagnostic modalities, we are forecasting to have no patients waiting over 8 weeks by year end, aside from probably around 200 to 300 patients waiting for a very specialist neurophysiology assessment. And that is we're wholly dependent on Cardiff and Vale capacity to deliver that. Whilst we won't deliver it by the end of January, we are aiming to be in a 8-week balance position for EMGs by June. So again, really, again, teams working exceptionally hard in order to address those. The only other thing, just to draw board's attention to, is the continued excellent performance now in our CAM services. So as you know, we were in targeted intervention. We've been dropped down to enhanced monitoring. I'm really hopeful that within the next review, we'll be able to come back down to business as usual reporting for mental health services, because of the excellent work we've made in CAM.
Yes, and thank you so much. We are going to come back with questions and open the board on the performance side of things, and I know there'll be probably a number of questions about how we are, successfully delivering against a number of our targets, and obviously, attempting to juggle quite difficult circumstances in light of the reduction in capacity we have as a result of what's happening at Princess of Wales Hospital. We'll come back to that in a moment. However, I just want to come to Richard, Dom, Lauren and Philip in respect to the quality section of the report, if that's okay. So Richard, I'll come to you next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just a few points for me. I guess just from an infection prevention control perspective, we're in a reasonable position looking at the data. Apart from, as you can see, the Clostridioides difficile in terms of the rates. So we know the prevalence within the community is high. That's the case across Wales and in fact across the UK. And there's a lot of work going into this as to understanding what that's about. Some of it's about prescribing factors. There'll be other factors in that as well. I think there's one thing to mention in relation to IPC. We are working at this stage towards what next year looks like in terms of our improvement trajectory. And indeed, I've committed to NHS Wales executive teams that from April onwards, we'll be working to SPC charts as to what our projected improvement will be. And the reason we're able to do that now is we've got much better. We're much better at using the information that we've got from an IPC perspective. We've always had the data. It's how we're using it in terms of dashboards. The team has strengthened. So we've now got a centrally run team advising and doing the surveillance work. And of course, we are now able to strengthen the health protection community arm in relation to infection prevention control this year as well with additional investment. So that's really going to help us in relation to the community prevalence around IPC. Moving forward, though, in relation to never events and NRIs. So there was one never event reported that's relating to a wrong site block, and indeed, if there are any questions upon that, Dom's agreed to provide a narrative. But more broadly, really, the NRI position's in a good position here. We've struggled in the past, particularly with the backlog, and that's linked heavily to some issues that we've all been aware of, such as ophthalmology, etc. But we are now getting on top of that, and indeed, our stakeholders within NHS Wales Executive are certainly more content and reassured by the work that we're doing from an NRI management perspective. And PTR then, so in relation to concerns, again, we've had really good sustained performance here since the end of last calendar year, or so it's the last quarter. We are going to see a projected decrease manufactured by us. So we're carrying a small backlog of cases, letters that need to go out to families that we need to send out. That will affect our performance for next month, by which then we're projected to come back up. This is something that I've discussed with Paul and the executives to say this is something that we need to do. But also what we're committing to do at this stage is to, now we've got our formal 30-day working day response element sorted out in terms of the process, we need to have a focus on our early resolution and trying to avoid concerns becoming formalised so we can respond within the clinical spaces. And that's a piece of work that we have to do, and we're committed to do this financial year. But more broadly, we have 53 open concerns at the moment, and 33 of those are currently with clinicians, nursing, AHP and medical for responses. So what we're also seeing at the moment in relation to our current performance is the result of winter pressures, and we need to be cognizant of that. So we will work and facilitate as much as we can, but we are expecting delays also due to the fact that we have to prioritise some of the work. Yeah, I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom.
Yeah, thank you. Two very quick things, Steve. Just beg your indulgence of just talk a little bit about hip fractures, if that's all right. So accepting we may go off track and now go behind times, so rail me in if I go too far. But I thought because it's the first time you're seeing this, if I give you some detail now, then in future ones it could be just a quick update. So for those of you who are trying to find it, it's page 199 of the 610 page. There's a table in the left that tells you the key 8 KPIs that we're going to be looking at. And it is not good to look at, it's not good to look at, I admit, but we will show improvements as we go through. For example, things like the admission to specialist ward is a very low number, but there are caveats to that. It's not that we're not putting our patients on the right orthopaedic trauma ward with the right nursing care. It's they have to be on that ward within 4 hours and with a nerve block in place in that time. So it's those caveats that we're failing on rather than actually where the patient's going in that situation. Orthogeriatric review, we have said many times that a lot of this is underpinned on having an orthogeriatrician service, which we have a plan for. We've shared that with you as to how we're going to get that up over the next year or so. The one site that does have one orthogeriatrician is the POW site, hence the reason you can see there's a 57% review there, but that's because there's one person doing those reviews, therefore they can't see everyone. Prompt surgery is reasonably good. We're looking at why the Royal Glamorgan is behind on it, and we know that data has improved since this has been put in place. Nice compliant surgery, again, this is down to the type of hip that you replace it with, whether it's cemented or non-cemented. There is a discussion amongst the orthopaedic community as to what the best thing is for a long-term. Uncemented is a quicker operation, cemented takes longer, and there's risks associated with it. So we're looking at what's best for the patients in that. But we are now changing more towards them being cemented, which is what the NICE guideline says. Mobilisation, there is a data issue here because if we look at it, both the nurses and the physiotherapists get the patients up every single day and within the first day, within 24 hours, but the data is not reflecting that. So we're talking out with our data teams to how they're actually capturing that. And then there are issues like non-delirious post-op, and that's related to who does the assessment and how formally we say the patient is not delirious or not. We've got a fair bit of work to do on the PCH and Royal Glamorgan sites amongst the whole team. It's not just cognizant on the nurses, but also that the doctors and physiotherapists need to be doing that as well. So there's a training issue we need there.
And the final thing I'll point out is bone medication looks very poor at the moment for our compliance and that, but as we've now invested in our fracture liaison service, that will be picking it up because the requirement is either on discharge or within 120 days of discharge. And the FLS service should pick up every patient within 30 days of discharge to ensure they're on the right medication. So we get that right, that'll start improving things and that'll prevent the secondary falls and the secondary fractures on that. So there is a lot going on in this space. The data doesn't really show that. It looks like we're underperforming, but there was a lot to be done to turn it around and a lot that the teams do. So just wanted to bring your attention and perhaps take any questions on that. And I won't be able to pass the opportunity without mentioning mortality. So we've now established a mortality board, which is pulling in all the aspects that we discussed in quite detail that we've got in safety committee. And that's bringing things from the medical examiner service through to the mortality reviews, through to the actual data that we've got and the quality of the data and the living we're getting that. And we're having talks with an external company about helping us develop that so we can really analyse the data and start finding the underpin, not just what mortality is, but what are the causes and what are the areas we need to focus in to address that. Those are the two things I wanted to raise.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, thank you very much.
Thank you. So just a little bit of additional context in terms of some of the data that's in the slides. So adult mental health and psychological therapies waiting times. You'll see that performance is stubbornly quite stable in terms of access targets. So the team have done a lot of work in terms of skill mix, recruiting to different types of professions where we've struggled. Recruitment and retention has improved, but demand has doubled since 2020. So teams are continuing to battle against that demand. There was some non-recurrent funding that came in, so that needs to be used by the end of March. But because of the nature of that funding, we can only use it for shorter treatments. So the teams have been running some groups within our primary mental health services, which is great, but they're not our longest waiters. So the longest waiters need the highly specialist psychological input. There's a paper on stroke later on in the agenda, but you'll note that there's some national challenges in terms of the SNAP data availability. Within diagnostics, Gethin's highlighted the teams are continuing to work hard to progress against the 8-week access target, so lots of great work happening there. We've successfully recruited to a head of radiography post. People might recall that we committed to that in phase 2 of the OCP in response to calls from various professional groups. So it's great that we've got that post made available with an existing resource, and that leadership will be key, I think, in terms of some of our priorities around diagnostics and the Hunteriston Health Park developments. And we've also had some, there's been a large-scale reaccreditation of echocardiography in POW, and the team have been successful in getting through that, which is great. And then from an AHP perspective, you'll see good performance there. Just to highlight, mentioning quality and safety and experience committee, actually some great work being done by the services to innovate and review how the services are delivered. So our physio community rehab have done some restructuring and review of pathways, reducing treatment, referral to treatment times, and a real positive shift in the patient-rated outcome measures as well as staff experience. And we talked about cancers before. So the specialist dietetic oncology clinic has been established. So reprioritization of existing resource, and they've gone from waiting 4 to 6 weeks for specialist input down to around 9 days. And we know that malnutrition within cancer patients can have a significant impact on their treatment options and their outcomes. Interestingly, of those patients that have been in the specialist clinic, they were offered a range of modalities for their inputs. 93 opted for phone consultation, 5% virtual, so only 2 opted for a face-to-face appointment, which I thought was interesting. And then you'll see on the agenda that the digital cell path case is going through our internal processes. That'll be coming back to the March board as our plan.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Philip, thank you. I don't have two points from the report here. One is around smoking. We are hitting our targets in terms of smoking cessation. We've got Help Me Quit operating across hospital sites. Whilst we're hitting our annual targets nationally, we are unlikely to hit the target of fewer than 5% of smokers in Wales by 2030 unless there is a massive step change in terms of how we operate. nationally. Obviously, we've got the tobacco and vapes bill that's coming through, with the enforcement work going on there. However, I mean, just to highlight within CTM, there is good work underway and is making progress. The other point is around vaccinations. Clearly, for childhood vaccinations, we are doing well. For MMR, we've got the highest uptake in Wales for MMR1. One of the reasons we're not seeing those measles cases transporting over the border from Bristol, where there's a cluster of cases, into CTM, is because our vaccine rate is high. However, winter vaccinations are not where we want it to be. You can see from the data in terms of the influenza uptake. We're not dissimilar to other health boards. That's not to justify where we are, but there is a national issue in terms of vaccine fatigue, etc. But it's not where we want it to be. And we brought to the board before in terms of the allocation for health protection monies was in CTM was lower than anywhere else in Wales. We have petitioned, thanks to a lot of work around this table, and we've received an extra £1.1 million this year. Recognising that vaccinations is the key area that we need to address, that money is being allocated to community infection prevention and control, vaccination, both community and staff, emergency planning, resilience, response and recovery, because obviously we need to keep the wheels on, and communication as well. So we're going to be funding communication posts because a lot of this comes down to understanding our population as well as hearing back from our population in terms of what they want to do. There's lots of work going on in the vaccination space. It's always an area that we want to improve. So rather than the children moving to e-consents, for example, targeting areas of low uptake, identifying schools where there's low uptake and going into them, working within care homes, working with community pharmacies, with GPs, etc. There's a lot of work as well underway in terms of data cleansing, so we actually know where we are and it's effective. But we recognise that this isn't, although we talk about the winter vaccination programme, it's actually year long, right? We need to be in the planning stage, in the delivery stage, etc., and reviewing what we are doing. We've had a recent audit of vaccination services as well that we'll be bringing to the Policy and Safety Committee. We're obviously undertaking the actions therein. We'll be bringing the plan back in March to say this is what we're doing to improve vaccination services.
Thank you, Philip. Much appreciated. Okay, last but by no means least, I'll turn to Howell now for an update on the workforce section of the report. Thank you, Howell.
Thanks, Chair. So just a couple of things I wanted to highlight. So first of all, you'd see, I've spoken before about the extent to which sickness absence has kind of flatlined at the moment. So we're still seeing that as a feature, which is positive in terms of sickness being relatively stable, but it is above where we would want to be. And while this health board historically has had higher sickness records than some of its neighbouring health boards, we do need to focus on that more. So I'll come on to that in a second, just in terms of some of the wellbeing work and the staff survey response that we're looking at. Turnover as well remains below the target we've set for ourselves, which was a 12-month reduction against our 1920 baseline, so a pre-pandemic baseline, which was around about 8.65%. We're at 8.45%. That's really positive, but loads more we can do there. You'll see that there is data in the report on the lateral moves process. We've got around about 71 nurses either have gone through or are going through that process at the minute. That's 1.7% turnover on its own. So, if we continue to do things like that have tangible impacts on retention, we've got a chance of making a real dent in where we are. I did have it quoted back to me recently that we've got the highest turnover out of all of the health boards in Wales. I think it's probably just worth putting that in context a little. There is a 1% range between the four health boards in South Wales, the four that are right next to each other. Because they're right next to each other, so that there is an ability then to bounce around the health boards, and unsurprisingly, Betsy's is lower and Howell is lower because can't go that far from those areas. So I think I'm not sure that's a terribly helpful comparison, but I am about to say later on that we've got the highest staff survey response rate in Wales. So,
sorry, I missed that. How will you repeat that?
But I genuinely don't believe that's a terribly helpful comparison. And I think even on those rates that were quoted back in October, we've shaved 0.5% off our turnover rate from that. And it is also worth noting that we were at around about 12.5% in October 2023, whereas some of the neighbouring health boards around us were at sort of 8-9%. So we've seen a drastic improvement. But obviously our focus will continue on retention. Just a couple of other things to say then. So Stataman training continues just to creep up very gradually. And I think worth noting that our core, so the 10 kind of most important, if you like, Stataman training requirements is above 80% now. I think that's the first time I've ever seen it above 80%. Since I've been here, we're well above pre-pandemic levels. And again, PDR stubbornly creeping up at a very slow rate, but it's creeping up all the same. So 2/3 of our people have now had a PDR in the last 12 months. That's not enough. That means a third haven't, but it is progress. We're currently going through a process of assessing your conversation, which we introduced a couple of years ago, as a new streamlined process with a focus on well-being and delivery of work that contributes towards CTM 2030, just to see how effective that has been. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on was some of our plans. So I've just got to give a thanks to HEIW here in relation to the staff survey. We have had a much better response this year in terms of systems. So we are expecting the data tomorrow. You'll recall last year we had it in May. That is a massive improvement, and the quality of our data has improved significantly. I would also say that's partly because we've had such a high response rate. We're hovering around about the 27% mark this year compared to 18% last year. Still lots to do to improve that, but that does give us really granular data so that we can take a corporate approach where we need to on thematic issues, but also have some local intervention from care group colleagues. And we've got some fantastic examples of that you heard about earlier from Dilys, most notably probably therapies colleagues, in terms of what they've done to really grab hold of this and do this locally with their teams. Some other retention schemes we're currently working with HEIW around improving opportunities for our colleagues who have come across to us from overseas. So we know that there is a bit of a buffer for them at a particular level, and that promotions beyond band 5, band 6 are limited. So HEIW have opened up a national talent pipeline to assist us with that, and we're also doing some localized work on that as part of our response to the workforce race equality standard. And that's probably, I think, all I wanted to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Harold. Okay. Ask board members if questions on the performance report, on the operational report, and obviously on the workforce report as well. Please indicate now. I'm sure there'll be quite a few questions. Ian, yeah.
Quick question. Noticing some of the graphs on prevention, I'm looking at the COVID-19 vaccinations for those eligible. Any reason why that seems to be staying stubbornly low? Have people got fed up with COVID or something? They don't want to get vaccinated? I don't know. What's the reason?
To be honest, yes. I think that's
Yes.
No, and I mean, there's people that may opt to get the flu vaccine, but there's lots of disinformation going around the internet about COVID vaccination, for example. And so, yes, I mean, I don't know the answer. I think there is a fatigue. I mean, that's the term used within the report. People are fed up with it and want it to go away. But the way to make it go away is to get back to them.
I think so.
Patsy, thank you.
Yeah, we had a very good and quite a long discussion on this report at operational delivery group earlier in the week. So I won't repeat all of my questions, but just a couple of things. On the header, page 4, it talks about 100% of GP practices achieved in-house access standards during 23-24. And it was the same last year, with the green arrow suggesting we're doing really well. Yet anecdotally, the thing most people complain about is not being able to get a GP appointment. Now, I completely understand this is the Welsh Government target and we're hitting it. And therefore, this is what we have to show, and this is what the board has to report. And I have no problem with that, except people that may choose to read this report, members of the public, it looks very disingenuous because it doesn't really chime with people's personal experiences. And so it's a comment, not a question, because I know we can't do anything about it, but I think it's worth highlighting. And my only question then is, the money that we've got for health protection, is that recurrent?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Getting on the primary care.
Yeah. So it's a really good point, and we've got a data reporting process that is asking the wrong question, and we need to be asking a different question to understand the number of failed appointments, people that are unable to get appointments, and so forth. So there is, I think that's something we need to, and we have started feeding back into the national team, which is probably looking, because actually the answer is they will suggest that, well, there isn't a problem because the data's telling us that's exactly what's been said. Equally, and this is where this then will be more slightly confusing, is we've also got some capacity data from general practice to say that in some places there's spare capacity. And so this is where we've got to really get under and through the through the primary care development piece, really get under understanding what is our demand and capacity for general practice. Because we know that there are patients who will contact our active hours services as soon as the phones are switched on because they've been unable to get an appointment to practice. We've all had personal experiences or have had family who've had personal experiences of challenges of getting there. So there's something about us really understanding that access data for general practice in a way that is meaningful and actually allows us then to be clear on what are the things that we need to do to make it better. Because at the moment we don't have any data that's meaningful to ask this question.
Helen?
Thanks. My question was for you, Gethin, please. You gave us some very good outcomes in terms of pathway 1 and the breast services. I just wondered, the percentages that you gave us, are they based on increased figures since 2021 you referred to? I wondered, is it like even better than that statistic shows, because is it more numbers?
Yes, so the volume of, yes, so one of the reasons why performance was much higher back in 2020-21 for cancer was that the cancer PTL was exceptionally small, because a lot of people weren't able to access general practice. During COVID, we know that referrals were much lower, and we know that during that time there was a large proportion of undiagnosed cancers, and that what we found then when we started reopening things, a real surge in people presenting with advanced cancer because they haven't been picked up. So yeah, absolutely. So whilst the percentage is good, the actual volume of patients is significantly higher. So it is a much more robust.
So it means that the performance is even better. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Phyllis?
Yeah, a couple of things. Firstly, to get in respect, the really good report on the cancer pathway. But how long do people wait to get their initial appointment from being referred to the GP? I mean, we may see them and they all done within 3 weeks, but have they been waiting a month to have the original appointment? That's
their appointment with the GP or their initial appointment with us.
Your initial appointment with
so
you.
the clock, but for suspected cancer patients, the clock starts on the date the suspicion of cancer was found. So
the GP appointment.
So that's the GP letter. It might be when we've done because GP letter is one bit. If we were to do a test on a patient because we think there's something going on a routine patient that hasn't been, at that point we've made that decision to do the test, the clock starts. But it is the whole pathway from as soon as the suspicion of cancer is there to treatment is 62 days.
Marvellous, thank you. I was just thinking, people being on waiting lists to see, yeah.
The other bit, Dennis, just in response to that, is that one of the sub-metrics we really focus on is what we call the 28-day faster diagnosis.
Yes.
So what we're looking at is trying to get the vast majority of patients through that diagnostic phase in 28 days from referral. We know that our cancer pickup rate is probably between 3 and 5% across most of our tumour sites. So that's 95% of the patients that are referred on a suspected cancer pathway do not have cancer. And whilst it's really, really important to start the treatment for those patients who've got cancer in a really timely way, we also have a responsibility to all those patients that don't have cancer to let them know as quickly as possible so they can get on with their lives.
Yes.
And so that's why we see that 28-day metric as a really important subset of that cohort.
And the bit about the GPs not being able to get an appointment, there is some sort of misunderstanding, I think, about within the community that they're not going to get an appointment. So is it worth ringing, or they go to the pharmacy or something like that? So perhaps there's a bit of communication around that. The other thing I want to mention is the workforce metrics report and the success of the lateral moves process. I'm really pleased to see that. That was something that came out of the People and Culture Committee, and I'm really pleased to see that it's working and it's helping us with our retention.
Okay, thank you. Cass, and then Hayley, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was really taken with what you were saying about the breast services and the fact that part of that success is around having a single centre of excellence across the CTM footprint. And I'm just wondering if we could do some sort of case study around that can sort of evidence that if we do have a single centre of excellence, we can get better outcomes. I think that'd just be really powerful, I think, you know, as we're looking forward towards our change and transformation programme. And then I think the second thing was to pick up on the vaccinations, which has been at least 3 committees have raised vaccinations that I've been on in the last couple of weeks. And we also talked about it in the CTM leaders group, which is very much looking at the partnership, working with our key stakeholders, third sector, etc. And I think there was a real enthusiasm, certainly on my table, to really help with getting more vaccinations out in the community, housing associations offering their accommodation and you know, centres and all of that side of things as well. And I think there's an opportunity probably, isn't there, for us to work in partnership, as you know, and I think it was a really good CTM leaders meeting as well that we had. So I just wanted to make those comments really. Yeah.
Thanks. Hayley.
Yeah, just kind of thank you. Picking up from what Cass just said there, really about the case study. I think that would be really good to hear, especially with the verbal update from the Senate beginning of the month, where I know sort of Welsh Government priorities have been care closer to home, but actually it's almost like they're kind of taking a little bit of a switch on that, where they're saying, oh, actually, we need specialised expertise in one place to offer the best patient care. And that just kind of feel a little bit of a mismatch, doesn't it, really? But actually with this case study, we can really push forward with plans for other services that we're going. So yeah, I think that'd be quite good. The other thing I just wanted to raise was brilliant news with our turnover with metrics, and definitely was Dennis was saying with the lateral moves programme, and just to kind of put my TU colleagues sort of at ease really with trying to raise that profile and make sure that it's still quite high on the agenda, that we're going to keep it forwards. I know they were a little bit concerned about it being on like a rota basis and stuff like that.
Yeah,
just being assured that it's still going to be.
So I'm comfortable.
Up there.
I'm comfortable with that. I have to say. So what this is about normalising the running of that scheme into the team rather than one individual. It's not possible for one individual to administer. I'm comfortable with it. I have to say it won't affect the kind of running of it or the prominence of it. And in fact, we're expanding that scheme out to HCAs and therapies as we speak, just to make sure
all the reports are really good. It's just so that I can take that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Lisa, thank you.
Question about the ADHD, ASD assessments. Obviously, I mean, compared to others, the compliance is quite good with the second, but it's still really low across Wales. Conscious that demand has gone up hugely, and it's like 3,000 patients compared to 510. But also the funding we've got for it is only temporary. So what are the plans moving forward? Are we hoping that the grants are going to come through again, or?
Linda?
Well, I think, Lisa, you're right to, how you describe the problem is exactly right. And I think we are relying on the results of our work to both change the demand profile, some of which is driven through people needing support, which might be deliverable not through a 2-hour consultant assessment. So we need to get better at picking the needle out of the haystack in the first instance, and sort of changing how we support people whose children have perhaps, behavioural difficulties rather than we need a diagnosis. Obviously, we've still got to get through the waiting list of people that have been referred, and the temporary funding that we have for that will help with that, but it won't eradicate it. So there is a risk that remains there. I agree.
It contradicts the CAMS figures are really positive, because obviously people's moving to the system and you've got these with the 90%.
Yeah.
And then you've got these that are still sort of concerned.
So they're waiting for that 2-hour multidisciplinary assessment. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it is what we're seeing in January is a significant uptick. So we did a in activity over plan. So that's so we will see that, and we recognise that's going to cause pressure in melatonin prescribing and other things in terms of the MD. But it is a complex case where we've got to make sure that we've got the right referral criteria to support it. We've got an issue for many of these patients where education is requiring these assessments, and actually how do we do that in a more joined up way, because at the moment, that a large proportion of the referrals are not deemed to have conditions. So there's something we need to do in a joined up
So
way.
is there merit in meeting up and doing some preventative work with the community focused schools? And I know there's a similar project in Bridgend.
So that is what that MD programme is doing.
So they are making
yeah. Heather Smith.
Couple of questions from me. Howell, in respect of the staff survey, firstly, congratulations on what has been a stellar performance this year compared to previous years where I know we've struggled to increase the level of staff engagement, but to get that response rate this year, I think really is testament to the hard work, the energy, the innovation that's been put into engaging with our staff. And I think I think staff increasingly are seeing the fact that there is a value in engaging in the staff survey, because by virtue of saying things about their experiences, we're trying to. I know you perhaps can't address every single point that people raise, but by demonstrating that we're attempting to respond to things that people tell us, hopefully is starting to mobilise more people to want to to give us their view. So I think it's brilliant, and obviously sets a higher bar now for the next iteration of the survey when that is done, presumably again in the autumn of this year.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
But no, it really is fantastic to see this happening, and I think we only do what we do because of the brilliant people who work with us, and I think the more we can reflect their experiences, their aspiration, the things that help them make their job tick a bit better, I think is just going to be good for us, and fundamentally good for patients as well. So but thank you for that. Gethin, just on some of the performance data, can I echo the reference that you've made to the 91% improvement, 92, 93% improvement now in terms of our breast cancer single cancer pathway target. That really is quite astonishing. And if you look at our overall performance in meeting that 62-day target in the single cancer pathway, now at over 63%. I remember one of the early conversations you and I had when I became chair, and that figure was around 46 to 47%. So there has been a sustained but significant improvement in how our services are responding. That really is superb. But obviously, you know, the focus has to be on those tumor sites where perhaps there is more of an intractable, or what has perhaps felt like an intractable challenge to improving the performance there. So obviously, I think seeing some focus there, I think is going to be really quite important over the next 12 months. We know where we are in terms of those 104-week waits for treatment. We know that you and the team have done a fantastic job in finding the capacity to bring that 104-week wait down. We know that where it's really difficult is in orthopedics. I'm just wondering, because I know that a lot of work, a huge amount of work, no stone has been left unturned by you and the team in trying to identify capacity either in Wales or outside of Wales to get people treated as quick as possible and off that list. I'm just wondering if you might want to just give an update as to how that work is done, the range of opportunities that you and the team have been seeking out, because I don't think the boards aren't always exposed to the number of different conversations and avenues that I know that chief operating officers and their teams go down in order to try and find ways of getting people treated.
So we've been working both with Swansea Vale and Carlton Vale to look at available capacity they have. That is capacity that we would have to provide the scrub team for, so the theatre staff as well as the surgeon. And we have got some lists now being made available from Cardiff on a regular basis. It's a more ad hoc arrangement with Swansea Bay. And when they've got lists that they are unable to accommodate, fill themselves. Where we've also worked with the independent sector across South Wales, the southwest of England. We've even been working with Trust in London to see what capacity they have. So areas such as the Southwest London Elective Orthopaedic Centre in Epsom. We've been looking at all of those areas in order to buy as much capacity as we can. We have, there is the private sector in South Wales is small, and that is maxed out now. One of our private providers is churning more work for us, so we are pushing more activity to them by year end. But we have now got we've now got an agreement with the independent sector for those patients that we can't take. We have pre-reserved capacity for April, May, June next year for those patients to have their operation. One of the problems when Welsh Government gave out some of the additional money for the waiting lists, because we had a plan to deliver in-house, we weren't given money up front. Other health boards were given money earlier than us and bought up the vast majority of the IS capacity. We then had the issue with the roof, and sadly that flexibility in the market was no longer there. But we have got, I think we will have by the year end 50-60 patients heading over to Bristol for treatment, as well as more locally.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay. Any other questions on the performance report, or any comments that colleagues need to know? No. Okay. We are going to take a 15-minute break at this point, so if people can return at 11:35. At that point, Kath is going to assume the chair, as Paul and I will be in a meeting with the Cabinet Secretary for about 15 minutes or so. But if you can return in 15 minutes, and we will then go on to the month 9 finance report from Sarah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome back to CTM board. I'm Kath Palmer, I'm the vice chair, and I'm standing in for John and Paul while they've had to nip out for a meeting with the class set. Really pleased then to invite Sally to present the finance month 9 report that board are asked to note. So Sally, can I hand over to you?
Thank you. So I'll take the report as read and just flag a couple of things. You'll note in here that we're continuing to report forecast break even for this financial year. That is after the receipt of an additional 7.5 million from Welsh Government. That was part of a distribution in the latter part of the calendar year, where some resource was released to some health boards who were away from their target fair share. That did not include us. And then every health board received a fair share allocation, of which ours was 7.5. For other health boards, they were asked to improve their forecast position by the amount of money they got, because they were in a deficit position. We were not asked to do this, but it was in recognition of some of the exceptional costs we've got associated with, for example, the POW roof. So that's now incorporated into the position, and we've been able to maintain that forecast. The risks to that forecast are coming down, and they're summarised. The largest one of those really has been the delay in confirmation of how much funding we're going to get for pay awards. We've had an assumed allocation in for some time when we do all the monthly reports. We understand that we are going to be funded at our anticipated allocation, and that letter is imminent in order to release those funds. And that's, we're talking about around 50 million in terms of the valuation of that. So it is quite a significant uncertainty. So we should see that, and that risk should then reduce as well. And clearly, the closer we get to the year end, the less risk there is of things going completely away. But it is pleasing to see that coming in that direction. In terms of our recurrent revenue position, the underlying deficit sits at 9.5 million. It was at 8.3 last month. The reason to flag that is, of course, that our intended position in our 3-year financial plan was to go into next year with a 2.1 million pounds modest surplus position to allow us to potentially invest a little more. Instead, we've got 11.6 million adverse movement on that, which is important to note. That's largely due to either savings, non-delivery, or operational variances in terms of the recurrent position. The only other thing I really did want to just flag has been, we've talked about a little already, and that is the significant increase in capital in year. As I said earlier, that has moved from around 54 million at the opening position to 87.5 in here, but now more like 92.5. So after receiving more funds, we will still be fixing some of those things. It's a huge amount of work to deliver that. And that just explains really why that graph looks a little bit like a hockey stick when you'd have expected it to look more like a straight line. But we are working on maximising that and to balance against our capital resource limit. So happy to take any questions, but that's really what I wanted to draw through.
Thank you, Sally. Can I open it up for any questions?
Yes.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, so does that mean you think that some of the model and some of the sort of factors that underpin that the anticipation of those savings were wrong, or that they just haven't been delivered for other reasons?
I think there's a mix in there. When we went into the year, we knew we had a higher risk position. If you remember talking about it about this time last year, that we were still carrying 10 million of unmitigated net risk. Yeah. And some of that was because our savings target wasn't necessarily underpinned by detailed plans. Through the year, Gethin and I met with the care groups, and we were in the process of developing recovery plans to bring that position back in, some of which have been disrupted by POW roof issues. So some of the plans that we had or were being developed by care groups were then disrupted. We also do take quite a stringent view to how we approach savings. Some other health boards may include any operational variance. So very minor sort of things like maternity or paternity leave Whereas we look to make sure that we can reduce the budget, and so it's a genuine saving, not just an operational variance. In the overall position, it balances out, but it means that we've got a clearer view about what our underlying position is. But what it does tell us is we really need to be clear that we've got detailed savings plans before we build our plans on them. And that's really where we need to be focusing our effort. Clearly, going into next year, we'll have continued disruption around the roof for at least 6 months of the year, which we need to work through.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, good question. Any other questions around the finances? Yeah, Patsy.
I just wanted to make a comment about how difficult it is to achieve the CRL, spend all that capital, particularly when it always comes in at the end of the year. And that's without all the extra stuff for the roof and the work going on. And when all the other health boards are trying to spend similar amounts of money, generally on IT, because that's seen as the easy way to do it. It's not easy, is it, Stuart? It's a good boost, but it's no way to plan and run a department. And I just think what the team do to spend that amount of money and hit the CRL, which I know we're not hit yet, but it is really, really outstanding.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a very small team in terms of the sort of capital planning team. Obviously, Stuart's team as well, in terms of the digital component, and procurement, who again find themselves towards the year end having to suddenly move through quite a lot of expenditure. So it is appreciated. It is a difficult task.
Thank you. Gethin.
Yeah, I just wanted to recognise the work of the capital team. Sally says it's really, really small. They are so supportive, and of course, it's not just the spending of it; it's all the workup of the scheme. It's being clear about all of that, and then ensuring the delivery as per the timescale. So, particularly Carolyn and Ian, just their support on everything associated with capital at the moment is they are going well and truly above and beyond.
Thanks, Gethin. Yeah. Any other questions? I mean, I was going to mention around the capital and the fact that we've probably got half our budget to spend in a couple of months, really, or 3 months, is it, Sally? Really, so it's quite a major challenge, isn't it, around that?
Yeah, I mean, there are some elements that we'll still fix. So the end of January is our fixed date. So tomorrow around the roof.
Right.
So we need to look at the cash flowing around that. Because clearly some of the expenditure will be next year. But a lot of the equipment purchases are being moved through. In fact, I've been improving things as we sit here because it's so vital to get them moved through at that pace.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. If there's no other questions, just want to thank you very much, Sally, for you and your team and all the work that you've done and everyone around the outcome of where we are with finances. And we'll note the report. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to item 6.3 then, stroke services. Gethin, can I ask you to give us an update on the stroke services?
Yeah, by all means. So I'll take the papers as read, and I'm very conscious that many members of the board have been part of discussions on this in other subcommittees. But just to remind board members, the need to move the stroke service was predicated by a critical shortage of medical workforce. And at the point that we had to consider the options, we had 2.8 whole-time equivalent stroke positions, which is tenable to provide to acute stroke takes as either end of the CTM pack. We'd already moved POW stroke services to the Royal Glamorgan as part of the action of linked to the roof recovery works. And so we had to do a robust analysis of the two options of locating the single stroke unit at the Royal Glamorgan or looking at placing it at Prince Charles Hospital. When we did that analysis, the primary driver had to be to ensure that as many acute stroke patients could continue to be treated within the CTM. The rationale for that is that all health board stroke services are exceptionally fragile, and that any significant increase in demand to neighbours, be that Swansea Bay, Cardiff or an Iron Bevan, was going to have a destabilising impact on their services as well as our own. So we went through a process looking at the travel times, looking at access, and it was clear that the Royal Glamorgan, being the site for the temporary co-location of the stroke services, met that brief with less impact on neighbouring health boards. So we have proceeded on that basis. Linda has been leading the work with our neighbouring health boards and with WAST to understand the effective transfer of patient pathways from areas that who previously would have been served by Prince Charles, that now need to go to the Grange predominantly, and that we continue to work that through. So that action was that change was enacted the week of it was on the 9th, Wednesday, the 9th of I think it's the 9th of January. I think that's the right day, isn't it? But it's definitely the Wednesday of that week. And has been now transferred down to the Royal Glamorgan. Just in terms then of the ongoing actions, the first priority is absolutely to ensure optimal delivery of the stroke service on the Royal Glamorgan site. So there's work going on about making sure that we run a single stroke unit, and that we really are about improving the delivery of our SNAP standards through that work. Linked to that is reviewing our rehab bed capacity model. We were conscious that we had probably more of our beds in the acute sector and a smaller bed stock in our rehab facility. We're looking at how we can perhaps rebalance that as part of this work, and we are continuing to recruit additional medical staff to the stroke service. So we've got adverts out at the moment for consultant neurologist with an interest in stroke to support that programme. And looking at the slightly longer term, we're continuing to work with Cardiff as part of the regional stroke model to be clear what is the optimal model for acute stroke delivery for the population of South East Wales. And so that continues. So we'll finish there, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Stefan. Thanks. Any questions? On stroke? Yeah.
Yeah, I understand this is a sort of temporary measure which is forced upon us by necessity, really. But do we have any idea how long this will last, or is that as long as there's a piece of string sort of question?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. I think what we've got to be clear about is that we've got a medical workforce that can sustain services over two sites. The reality is that the POW roof is not going to be, that work isn't going to be finished until till mid to late summer. So it's how so part of the planning piece is understanding that in terms of the operational drivers, but I know Linda will want to come in on.
So we're monitoring and evaluating the impact really closely, and we anticipate an improvement in our SNAP data. We'll watch the proms and perms really carefully too. The question will be whether we can justify. We're aiming to have that South East Wales model at least proposed, if not consulted on fully, by the summer. And so one might hope that we go straight into that process, because we can't, if we see the improvements we anticipate, you can only go to realistically, we can only change back if we can guarantee maintaining those same standards. Yeah. So that's why it's so important that the regional model informs the right way forward.
Thanks, Linda. Patsy.
Yeah, I was going to ask something similar actually. We've been talking this morning about how we've seen improvements in breast cancer results by having centralised it onto one single place, and how much better that is for patients. We didn't actually question whether or not that had been easy with the clinical staff and indeed admin staff to do that. That's probably a different question. So what I understand, Linda, is we're expediting the plan for the future of stroke services based on this temporary change. Once we've got the data and the information to compare and contrast with previous, so we won't automatically revert. We will look at the data and see what best goes on. Choosing my words very carefully. But presumably we'll do that. And just one other thing I wanted to say is we did have a discussion, as Gethin alluded to in different forums within the last couple of weeks. We also had a presentation on brainomics, which was helping with the stroke service. And it was, I don't know if we've seen that as a group in board. I know we've heard about brainomics, but the results they're getting were phenomenal, really, but all with the human safety net. So whilst it wasn't picking out some things, and AI's not pick out everything, there was that human safety net. So I just wanted to make a point that that was a really good presentation.
Thanks, Patsy. Linda, do you get
Can I just make a point because I think that it's really important that we understand and that the language, the hygiene around the language. So the regional stroke programme was instigated in order to ensure that across South East Wales we are delivering to the required standards of the National Stroke Pathway, and that work predated this. This has made it really important for us that that work is on track for delivering a recommendation in the summer. And there had been a bit of a hiccup, and we are now making sure that we're getting that to deliver on time. So it's not. I just want to be clear that we haven't triggered that work. But it's also it's slightly hindered. We're working on the NHS England guidance at the moment because the world guidance hasn't been published. So we're kind of second guessing. So there's a little bit that we're having to do to pull everything together.
Thanks, Linda. I've got Dom and then Geraint, and then I'll hand back to John. We've got the chair back. Dom.
Yeah, Linda picked up on my answer there about this national status, and that's what has to drive all of this as we go through. And I think the best way of putting it is that at the end of the day, we need the best service for our population, whatever that is. So looking at what the SNAP data is, looking at what the outcomes are, we then have to model it from that point on. And if there's a case for one way or the other, we need to look at that closely. In terms of this being focused on the clinicians' availability, if somebody's on maternity leave for potentially another 9 months minimum, we are paying an extremely high rate for locums. So even if that person was to come back, we'd have to make a decision at that point. But also the fact that recruitment is nigh on impossible, really, in this area, if I'm honest with you. We're looking at neurologists as alternative pathways for this because they aren't out there. So we have to sort of be realistic on how long that time frame is going to be. But keep looking and keep looking abroad as well as many options as we can to recruit into. That's going to be the sticking point. We can't recruit more and expand the numbers. We can't then go back to thinking multiple scale.
Thanks, Dom. Geraint.
Yeah, I promise we didn't whisper to each other before you just. I was exactly going to ask about the workforce aspect of it, because clearly, although we've discussed in lots of different fields the advantage of centralising services, I mean, in some cases, the good outcomes that have come from that, this is principally driven by an issue of workforce, and particularly consultant workforce. So, I mean, hypothetically, presumably, the situation could arise where we had no staff at all. And then what would happen then, sort of thing? So what is the situation nationally in terms of the pool of people who have a specialism in this area?
It's changed slightly because now we're getting what's called joint specialties. So people who now have neurologists are also dual trained in to be able to manage stroke as well. So that actually opens up a much bigger pool of options for us. But there's still only 1 or 2 candidates that come out. And at the moment, let's be honest,
if you were put on a piece of paper, would you like to join a service where you do a 1 in 12 on call or a 1 in 4 on call? Consultants are going to go with what the logical thing is for them, and they're going to get to better work-life balance, aren't they? So it's how do we have that conversation with Carl about how we start sharing resource or work in a different way that actually we can make sure that that pool is shared out amongst all of us. But it's not unique to just South Wales. You could go to any part of North England or Scotland even and have virtually the same conversations we're having there. It's a difficult area across all of the UK.
Okay, thank you. Karen, did you want to come in?
It's all right, I think.
Okay, it's been
my
answered.
point, really.
Paul, should we?
Yeah, I just want to come back on to talk about our patients. So when we talk about our patients, the right for our patients, we have to do that, but we've also got to be mindful of the wider southeast region as well, because the risk is we could do the right thing in that CTM, but there'll be another group of patients nearby who are going to be really. So that's why it is a really complex challenge to solve, because we look at it through our lens. But we've then got to look at it, and then we've got active conversations going on with neighbours in Powys and AB and Cardiff. So the answer to this is a regional solution with a service in CTM, but the exact configuration of that is still yet, as Linda said, still yet to be exactly defined. And the role of Cardiff Specialist Centre in that is really important as well. So the trouble is, of course, that brings in 4 or 5 different organisations, and it adds the complexity and the timescales of making the decisions. But it's important we do it properly and look at the wider region as well.
Thank you, Paul. John, did you want to?
Yeah, no, thanks, Gav. I just before getting just to say, notwithstanding the fact that this was a very difficult decision before Christmas, it was the right decision to take. Not the ideal position to be in, because we had to deal with what was in front of us at the time with the challenge around the staffing complement. But being the sort of positive bloke I think I tend to be, it's quite. I think what we need to try and do is turn what was seen as a negative at the time into something that is positive and ambitious and hopeful about the future. And going back to Linda's point about and Paul's around the South East Wales working, talking to our colleagues in Nairn Bev and Cardiff Vale health boards around. What does, in addition to what we do here, what does a regional service look like? How do we start to say to the population of CTM and in those other 2 health board areas that there is a great ambition about what this looks like in the future? Because I don't think people realise that our stat data on this has not been particularly good, and that's no comfort to us. It shouldn't be any comfort to them, quite frankly. But I think we just use this as opportunity to say, look, we've got what we've got. But what we need in the future can look better and brighter and give people a better health outcome as a result. And I think it goes back to that consultation, Linda, whatever that looks like in terms of the narrative, the hope and the aspiration that we want to see in it, and to use that opportunity to really craft something that is far better than what people have had in the past.
Hayley, sorry.
Thank you. It was just sort of appreciating what Linda was saying really with this, that this hasn't been sort of, a kind of an expedition or expediting. There were things going on in the background. I just wonder to what level people on the ground are aware of that. Because if we look at it from their perspective, I think there is strong feeling that we're kind of forcing their hands and we're kind of, do you know what I mean? And it's just sort of engaging with them and really.
I think that's helpful. And in fact, where we were talking to Cardiff just the other day about setting up a clinical workshop in February. There's a date, there's a time, pizza's yet to be ordered. But it will be an evening, we're into that territory. And Gethin's talking through with James and others who should be there. So I think that's a really important part of the process. So thanks, Amy.
Because we've got great ambition for it, and I 100% see the need for it developing. But I just want to bring everyone with us rather than then reach that point and be.
Thanks, Hayley. And I think it's a really good point, because I think we've already learned sort of lessons around how we've done immediate change when we've had to, in terms of communication with staff, as well, has been certainly pointed out to me. And I've seen a different approach being taken when we've had to do different changes. So I know as an organisation we are learning from that. So I think it's a really good point, Hayley. Thank you. Yeah, Laura.
Just coming back on that point. So when the regional programme was launched, there was a huge engagement workshop. I don't know if people remember. So lots of clinical engagement. Yeah. But as we've referenced, the regional stuff had
A bit quiet.
tapered off. So people will remember that. But I think it's a good point to raise in terms of reminding them that work's been ongoing for a while.
Good point. Okay. Okay, are we happy to note the report before I hand over officially back to the chair? Are we happy to note where we are on stroke? Thank you very much. Thank you. Right.
Thanks, Kath. And perhaps, Linda, as we get close to that point at which we are saying things with our colleagues in South East Wales, I think it may be good for us to return to that in a future board meeting as well. I think there's obviously, I hope we've got all that excitement about what the future looks like. Okay, thanks. Moving on to item 6.4, the integrated medium-term plan, verbal update. Linda, thank you very much.
Thank you. So very much a verbal update because we're right in what we sometimes describe as the spin cycle of this process. So we've done the work over the last few months in terms of setting out the expectations from care groups and corporate teams in terms of what their IMTP needs to deliver. We've had the first cut plans on a page, and the first cut from each of those budget holders about their savings plans. As you know, the Christmas present is your allocation and the planning guidance. I'm happy to say that there was nothing in the planning guidance that we hadn't anticipated and weren't already taking account of. And I think probably similarly with the financial allocation. But needless to say, we're still at the stage of trying to make both ends meet in the middle. And we'll keep you apprised through informal briefings about the process to close that gap. Care groups and corporate teams are working again on another set of submissions that come in on the, I forget what date was it. I think it was the 5th of February that they're all due back in, so next week. So that, because obviously the next deadline is if we cannot balance our plan, we have to write a letter to Judith Paget, an AO letter, and we'll need to be able to clearly describe the nature of the gap and what's driving that and what we're doing about it. So that's our hard deadline.